As a parent, gentle means everything. It's the mindset behind everything you do, from the kisses and cuddles to packing a bag on a day out. But in a complex world, gentle isn't always easy. At Johnson's, we believe in the power of gentle, continuously raising the bar by improving our products from the inside out, ensuring they're free from dyes, parabens and sulfates, just simple ingredients, as gentle as your baby. Johnson's, choose gentle.
Says he'll back a €9 billion government bailout, giving the rescue plan a shot of momentum ahead of a crunch vote.
One of Johnson's key ministers is on the ropes as more details emerge about a London property deal, and President Trump says some US troops will move from Germany to Poland after meeting the Polish president. I'm Leanne Gerrans with World News.
And buyers bid for closure. The chemicals giant spends more than $12 billion to settle thousands of Roundup cases and other US lawsuits, but a significant number of cancer claims remain unresolved.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, on DAB Digital Radio London, Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington DC, Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM Channel 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
And a very good morning from London. I'm Roger Hearing.
And I'm Naira Chahij. Good morning, everyone. It's 8:01 a.m. in London, 9:01 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. And Roger, it seems that yesterday Wall Street was faced with the grim reality of an increase in coronavirus cases. Of course, there's lots of disparity between states, but what it has started to show is that those that were late to lock down or early to reopen might be facing more risks ahead. So, for example, what you're seeing is in California, Disney delaying the reopening of its theme parks indefinitely. New York, New Jersey and Connecticut in the northeast setting quarantines for incoming travelers from hotspots, and North Carolina putting its reopening on ice for 3 weeks. So basically it tells the story of a complicated picture in terms of easing lockdowns and what that therefore might mean for the economy.
Yeah, and it's a global picture. It's not just America. Obviously, that's what's perhaps foremost in investors' minds, but we're seeing problems in Australia, certainly seeing what they're calling a nightmare scenario in Brazil. But at the same time, Nera, there's also this sense that there are other big sharks out there in the water, not least relations between Beijing and Washington. We saw the Pentagon start naming companies they think are linked to the Chinese military. We've also had suggestions from the US about bigger tariffs between the US and Europe. So there's a lot to worry about.
Definitely, and the IMF certainly reflecting those concerns in terms of downgrading its global outlook. And we were just speaking to Derek Halpenny of MUFG in the last hour, Roger, and what he said was the question is not whether the reversal of lockdowns results in a growth rebound. We were talking yesterday about the distinction between rebound and recovery, but whether it triggers a strong enough rebound to meet the expectations in the market. And you do start to question what the expectations so far have been. We've been saying a lot on the show, the expectation has been, even if we get a second wave, we're not going to see lockdowns like we did before. And then you get David Solomon of Goldman Sachs, CEO at Goldman Sachs, saying that really there is a stock market, the rebound that we've seen has been out of step with the economy.
Yeah, so a sense there that there's a lot of doubts out there, but are we going to see correction anytime soon? And we've seen certainly a risk-off mood this morning, but it doesn't amount to a correction.
Exactly. When you think of all the cash on the sidelines waiting to be deployed, you do wonder whether there will be any form of meaningful correction, even if investors do start to take a little bit more of a grim outlook for the growth picture. Let's look at equities then, Roger. 3.5 minutes into the equity market open, we were lower by 2.8% in yesterday's session, but actually the losses are much more muted today. So the Stock 600 opens lower by just 0.5%. If we take a look at regional equity benchmarks, the FTSE 100 down 0.8%, the CAC 40 down 0.6%. The DAX is actually flat. That might be to do with some corporate heavyweights that are going to be opening higher in today's session, which we'll discuss in just a moment. IBEX lower by 0.7%, FTSE MIB lower by just 0.25 percentage point. We saw a drawdown of 2.6% in the S&P 500 yesterday. The Nasdaq declined for the first time in 9 sessions. S&P E-minis down 0.8%. Dow futures down by the same. Nasdaq futures lower by 0.4%. Looking at the 10-year Treasury yield, we are back below the 70 handle. We slip a basis point today towards 66. The 10-year Bund yield now lower by a basis point at negative 45. 10-year gilt yield slips almost 2 basis points at 17 basis points. We've seen the dollar broadly against G10 extend gains. That sort of signals to the risk off that we're seeing. But interestingly, the yen is slightly weaker. You might expect that to be gaining if it was a true risk off right now. And then taking a look at oil, so dropped yesterday by the most in almost 2 weeks. Stockpiles data plus virus concerns. You see declines extend today. WTI down 0.8%, $37.68 a barrel. Brent trades at 39.96, down 0.9%. Roger.
Right, well, let's have a look at what stocks are to watch this morning. We've been joined by Bloomberg's Teresa Elizabeth Pushka. Good morning to you. I mean, there really are only 3 stocks very much in fix, all German at the moment. I mean, let's start off with the good news, which perhaps maybe we'll discover later on today. Lufthansa, quite likely now that the main shareholder is backing that deal with the government, the bailout deal. So how is Lufthansa faring?
Yes, exactly. So, Lufthansa really called up big time today. We're talking about, 20%, and this is on 2 items. Well, firstly, as you mentioned, the key one is the news that the key shareholder, Chile, is at the end really supporting the government bailout package, which is due to be voted at the special GM today. Well, throughout last week, we've had loads of worries about Chile voting against this agreement at today's GM. He had earlier criticized the steep discount on Germany's 20% of Lufthansa's stake as part of the bailout. While had Chile opposed this, it could have meant insolvency of the airline. And secondly, a bit minor, but I think still crucial looking forward to get Lufthansa back on track, really, is that Lufthansa has now agreed with trade union UFO to reach a temporary wage reduction deal, saving around 500 million euros. And this comes after Lufthansa failed to reach a deal with unions earlier this week. So really a positive step forward.
Yeah, and that's shown, as you say, in the share price, 14%. I've gone up at the moment on the Zetra. And Bayer, now that's another interesting one. They're paying out $12 billion to put the Monsanto liabilities behind them. It doesn't mean it's all sorted, so how are they playing?
Yes, well, not quite all, but really it's a big step towards finally ending all this Monsanto-related litigation. So the big one is a settlement on the majority of glyphosate cases. This, remember, is a compound in Monsanto's weed killer that is said to have caused cancers. The agreement will resolve around 75% of cases, with Bayer paying between $10.1 to $10.9 billion to resolve all current lawsuits, including setting aside $1.25 billion for future claims. Moreover, and this really is quite a pleasant surprise, Bayer also managed to settle other Monsanto-related cases, such as the PCB case for $820 million. It's a Monsanto chemical use as a cooling agent in heavy equipment, and it also managed to settle $400 million in the dicamba herbicide case. It should really all of this should come as a huge relief to investors, really, as it means we can focus back on Bayer's fundamentals. And yes, I mean, Bayer shares have been up significantly on trade gates and called up around 7% on this.
And finally, the other German company with perhaps no great reason to celebrate right now, Wirecard. I mean, that's been a long and difficult story about billions going missing. How is that playing now?
Yes, I mean, all very convoluted. I mean, I think to me every day is almost more unbelievable. Yesterday we've had Marsalek, which is another Wirecard executive, intending to turn himself into the Munich prosecutors on next Monday. This, of course, comes after ex-CEO Brown was granted bail by the same prosecutors this week. And, of course, today's story then revolves around Wirecard whistleblower tipping off the German watchdog BaFin already in 2019. BaFin really being criticized now on this or not taking early action.
Yeah, and we're seeing Wirecard right now down 4% all right now. Thanks very much indeed. Teresa Elizabeth Pushka joining us with Stocks to Watch this morning.
Yeah, and just to give you the price and the cash trading for Bayer as well, Teresa Elizabeth was talking about the shares being called up 7%, Bayer up 2.3% right now, and Lufthansa shares opened up higher by more than 20%, they're now up 14%. Let's get to our top stories, Roger. We start with a virus update in the US as the pandemic as the pandemic sets records for infections and hospitalizations across the country. New cases rose by 1.6% versus the 1.3% average of the preceding week. The University of Washington now predicts 180,000 Americans will die by October. According to Johns Hopkins, around 120,000 have died so far.
And given the uncertainty around the pandemic, David Solomon thinks stocks are getting a little ahead of themselves. Goldman CEO said the equity rally that's erased almost all of this year's losses can't be justified by corporate profit potential.
The equity market does seem to be a little bit ahead of my view of the future earnings performance of businesses as we look 6 to 12 months out. And if that's true and I'm right about that, you'll see a rebalancing of that over time.
And Solomon was speaking at the Bloomberg Invest Global Virtual Summit.
Also at the event, Roger, Bridgewater's Bob Prince said the impact of the pandemic could last 18 to 24 months, complicating monetary and fiscal policy efforts to bolster the economy. And we'll hear more from that interview later in the hour.
Meanwhile, the Chicago Fed President Charles Evans has warned that recurring virus outbreaks will probably hurt U.S. growth and keep unemployment levels elevated for some time to come. And the St. Louis chief, James Bullard, called the pandemic a major crisis, though he still expects a strong second-half recovery.
The International Monetary Fund has downgraded its outlook for the economy. It's projecting a significantly deeper recession and a slower recovery. Geeta Gopinath is the IMF chief economist.
The case we have simulated of a second wave would generate basically zero growth in 2021 as compared to 5.4% growth in 2021, which we are projecting. So that is the classic L-shaped, non-recovery. And that would be a really dire outcome. And we're getting then even closer to Great Depression levels than we already are.
The IMF also sees global GDP shrinking 4.9% this year. That's more than the 3% slump it predicted just 2 months ago. And if the virus continues to surge, it says it could get even worse.
Now on to US-China tensions, and the Pentagon's named 20 Chinese firms it says are controlled by the Chinese military. It opens the companies up to the potential of more US sanctions. The list includes Huawei and Hikvision. The move comes as relations between the two superpowers continue to deteriorate. China is likely to be a key campaigning issue in the 2020 election.
Those are your top stories. For the latest in global news, here's Leanne Gerrans. Hi, Leanne.
Naira, and thank you. Let's start here in the UK, where the Housing Secretary is facing calls to resign after releasing documents and text messages about a controversial planning application. These messages were exchanged before Robert Jenrick approved Conservative donor Richard Desmond's plans for a housing development. Jenrick's been accused of cash for favours by the opposition Labour Party. Speaking in the Commons yesterday, Jenrick denied any wrongdoing.
Contrary to the wild accusations propagated by the honourable gentleman opposite and restated today in a series of totally inaccurate statements and comments, this was a decision taken with an open mind on the merits of the case.
Meanwhile, Downing Street says the Prime Minister considers the matter is now closed. President Trump has said some US troops currently stationed in Germany will be relocated to Poland, reiterating his criticism of Berlin's defense spending. He also announced that the US and Poland will begin work on a nuclear project. The US president met with his Polish counterpart, Andrzej Duda, yesterday, who has previously emphasized the need for US troops in Europe to maintain security. And as mentioned earlier, a grim milestone for the number of states in the US. California, Florida and Texas each set records for new coronavirus cases yesterday, and Arizona hit a peak in hospitalizations. The new numbers reflect the spread of the virus in some states that were slow to enforce lockdowns or quick to lift them. Meanwhile, a new model predicts the death toll will hit 180,000 by October. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. The UK's 5-year gilt yield has dropped to a record low of negative 41 basis points. This is Bloomberg.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. The university helped biomedical engineering professor Tara Alvarez launch a startup that may revolutionize vision therapy.
our startup through NJIT is called Ocular Motor Technology. We create virtual reality vision therapy in a head-mounted display. So it's gaming, and basically we're sugarcoating the therapy so that children and young adolescents don't even realize they're doing therapy. To accomplish this, we need biomedical engineers, which are here on NJIT campus, computer scientists, artists, people that are into story development, and then we're collaborating with a lot of the large pediatric medical centers. This idea of a startup culture is extremely important to not just NJIT and the National Science Foundation, but also to the U.S. as a societal whole.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Take the Bond Challenge. Use the free Interactive Brokers Bond Scanner to search their deep availability of U.S. government securities, 38,000 global corporate bonds, and 850,000 municipals. IBKR passes through the highest of all bids and lowest of all offers received at the electronic venues it accesses. We do not widen spreads, apply hidden fees, or mark up quotes. How many basis points does your current broker keep? Find out at ibkr.com/bonds.
To protect her home and family in a disaster, Karen was willing to wade through water, mud, and insurance paperwork.
Yeah, I can do this.
You go, Karen! By simply understanding and updating what her insurance covers and doesn't cover now, she'll be better prepared no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Heidi Stroud-Watts.
It's bringing Victoria Fernandez, who's been betting on tech among other sectors through this course of volatility. Victoria is a chief market strategist at Crossmark Global Investments. They manage $5 billion in assets. Victoria, great to have you. And I was just looking through some of your picks, which include adding to positions when it comes to Amazon. It feels like this kind of tug of war that's still going on with the rotation story in the market. Is there still a big question mark as to what stocks benefit when we get to normal, and of course what the new normal actually looks like?
Well, Heidi, I think you're absolutely right. It is a question of what does the new normal look like. And instead of making a bet on a COVID-19 play per se, we're actually looking at things that have evolved through COVID-19, but we think are going to be longer-term trends that continue after we get back to whatever we consider that normal. And that's why we've been focusing on some of those secular growth stories. So, yes, some of the names like Amazon and Apple that we've had in the portfolio, we've added to on some pullbacks, but we're also looking at names in data infrastructure space like American Tower. I mean, we see how people are continuing to use more and more data. We're looking at how people are beginning to work from home.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from London. I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Business Flash. And it's a bit of a risk-off day in markets this morning, with the FTSE actually leading declines at the moment, down 1.3%. The DAX lower by 0.8%, and the Stock 600 down 1.1% this morning. US futures also in the red, following a similar down day in Asia amid investor concerns following a spike in virus infections in the US. So if we look at a couple of stock specifics today, I'm keeping a close eye on Deutsche Lufthansa, which has surged more than 9.7% after the biggest shareholder in the airline suggested that he would back the bailout plans by the German government. Bayer also gaining slightly in Frankfurt this morning as it moves to end all its legal cases in the US at the moment. Now, over in the currency markets, we are seeing havens gaining. So the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up 0.3% at the moment on that negative market sentiment. The yen holding at 107.1, sterling at 124. The euro a bit weaker, down 0.2% at 112 this morning. We are seeing the Korean won and the offshore yuan down both 0.4% at the moment. In the bond markets, sovereigns are bid. The 10-year Treasury yield down 2 basis points at 66 basis points. Similarly so for bund yields at negative 46. 10-year gilt yields sliding to 17 basis points. points this morning. Just a couple of minutes ago, we did see the 5-year gilt yield fall to a record low as well. So some interesting moves there. Gold is moving higher, up 0.3% at $1,766 a troy ounce. Finally, WTI has dropped below $38 a barrel amid concerns over the virus and growing US stockpiles. WTI down 1.5% at 37.4. Brent below $40 a barrel. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Ian Garrins with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. Let's start here in the UK, where many parents may struggle to find childcare when they return to work as the lockdown eases. This comes as nurseries are warning of mass closures. England's early years providers have been operating at 37% of their capacity since early June, according to a report from CEDA. Research shows they face huge losses if this continues. Urgent government intervention has been called for. South Africa has reported a record 5,688 new coronavirus cases. This marks the most in Africa and a fifth consecutive day of new cases surpassing 4,000. Yesterday, the number of people who died after contracting the virus in the nation rose by more than 100 for a second day. And in Russia, President Vladimir Putin has put the country's military might on display despite the coronavirus. Yesterday, a parade featuring 14,000 troops and weaponry took place to mark the 75th anniversary of the World War II defeat of Nazi Germany. The event took place a week before a vote on changing the constitution. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on quick take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now let's go to Germany, where Lufthansa's biggest shareholder, billionaire Heinz-Hermann Thiele, says he'd vote in favour of a €9 billion government bailout. This is giving the rescue plan a shot of momentum on the eve of a crunch vote and also giving the shares a shot of momentum to the upside. Lufthansa shares opened higher by 20%. They're up 10.3% right now. For more, let's go live to Berlin, where Bloomberg senior editor Benedict Kamel is standing by. Benny, great to have you with us. So what was it that changed Thiele's mind and what should we expect today?
Well, that's the big question. We don't quite know why Thiele first said that he wouldn't rule, or I should say, he never really said he won't vote in favour. He always sort of was very murky about his intentions. So it might well be that really he just played a game of gambling and seeing how far he could push the government. And when he found that he can't push them as far as he wants them to, then he sort of caved in, as it were, and said, yes, I'm in favour. So it looks as if the vote today will go ahead, and he obviously carries a very substantial role in this, given that attendance is low and his stake is high. So he is really the person who can tip the scales here. And at noon today, we will have this extraordinary shareholders meeting that will vote on the bailout, and it looks as if at this point it will go through. And as you said, we can see it in the stock. It's up considerably because it looks as if, at least from now, the spectre of an insolvency is that's been we've gotten rid of that.
Well, Benny, what happens next, though? Because you've got an airline that's clearly in a very difficult world for airlines. So, I mean, this isn't going to be high-flying, if we can put it in those terms, from now on.
No, absolutely not. Because, first of all, this is money that's not just given to them. They have to pay it back at some point, and the way to pay it back is that you really tighten the belt. And what we're seeing is the company saying we need to cut about 20,000 jobs. We need to reduce our fleet. So you will end up with an airline that will have fewer employees, fewer routes, fewer planes, and will be in some ways a shadow of its former self. And that's going to play out over months, if not years. So it'll be very difficult for this airline. And we still don't quite know if, how, and when travel demand will return. Crucially, the business travel part. So a lot of question marks remain. They probably will manage this first hurdle today, but their problems are far from over.
Yeah. Now, speaking about problems over or not, let's also talk about Bayer, because it's agreed to spend more than $12 billion to resolve thousands of US lawsuits. Initially, we saw the stock open higher, Benny, but it's down 0.2% right now. What does this tell us?
It's difficult to say whether this sort of is a glass half full or empty situation. If you look at it positively, you could say, okay, they've sort of put a marker in the ground. They've managed to resolve the bulk bulk of these cases. Out of about 125,000 cases, they've resolved 90,000, and those include the tricky ones. But if you look at the glass half empty, it means there are about 30,000 cases still pending, and whether they will be able to resolve these soon or whether that'll drag out for years is anybody's guess. So they're not out of the woods yet. The company will tell you that this is a good deal for everybody, this is a good deal for the plaintiffs, take it or leave it, and if you leave it, you have no assurance that you will get something better. So for Werner Baumann, the CEO, this is a way of putting a stop to this. He's really been haunted by this deal for the last couple of years, but investors are still sort of digesting the deal that happened late yesterday, and whether they will give Baumann a mandate to sort of fulfill his vision of making this deal work, that's another question.
All right, Benedict, thanks very much. Benedict Campbell there, Bloomberg's senior editor, live on the line from Berlin, giving us what's looking in German companies this morning. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. We'll get an update today on how the economy did during the first quarter of this year. Analysts are forecasting a 5% decline in gross domestic product, the same as last month's estimate. This is a time of change in the economy, according to BlackRock chief strategist Kate Moore.
Whenever there are massive dislocations or disruptions to the economy, entrepreneurs and innovators come up with new solutions to the problems that have arisen. And, I'm expecting to see many new ideas.
Investors will keep a close eye today on the government's weekly count of first-time jobless claims. Economists see a decline to more than 1.3 million. Ford today is expected to unveil the next generation of its F-150 pickup. Reports say it'll be loaded with technology as well as a lie-flat sleeper seat. Separately, GM is eliminating the third shift at its SUV plant in Spring Hill, Tennessee, to bring production in line with demand. Nearly 700 workers will lose their jobs. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
The market is unpredictable. BAM gives you certainty. In the face of volatility and illiquidity, BAM-insured municipal bonds deliver default protection, value preservation, and a durable AA rating from S&P. BAM's insurance protects against everything that causes a default, including natural disasters, financial fraud, pension issues, and economic disruption, like the one we're experiencing right now. BAM. Build America Mutual. Ask your broker about BAM-insured municipal bonds.
Not completing high school is more of a social.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Thursday morning by the scruff of the neck. Take this sunshine as an omen and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like when your week off is forecast warm and sunny. Or when there's an extra unclaimed sausage left on the barbecue. Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that feeling. Nice, isn't it? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are
ploughing on, boxing up goods and rolling them out, shipping kettles,
instruments to kids,
art for walls,
treats to pets, shorts for sunny weekends,
to brighten up one British home at a time.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. Why not book an MOT to get you safely back on the road?
With over 600,000 carried out every year at 350 garages, you can always count on our experts. And get back to visiting those you've missed the most.
Hi, Mum.
From a safe distance, of course. From MOTs to battery replacements and tyre fittings, there's no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
The Mini Electric was raring to go until ready, set, stop. We hit the power down switch. We waited. But now it's time to start up again. We're ready with the Mini Electric and whole Mini range online. Showroom safety measures are set, and we're feeling good to go. Find your perfect Mini at mini.co.uk.
Live to London on DAB Digital Radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Naira Chehich.
And I'm Roger Hearing, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Roger, a risk-off tone to markets today, although even though we are seeing declines in the Stock 600 of almost 1%, that's not as much as yesterday, where we actually saw Europe's equity benchmark drop almost 2.8%. Across regional equity benchmarks, you see the FTSE 100 lower by 1.2%, so definitely accelerating losses to the downside across some of these benchmarks. CAC 40 lower by 1.1%. The IBEX and FTSE MIB also both lower by 1%. The DAX is sort of outperforming, if you like, down just 0.5%, but a lot of that could be to do with the fact that we've been seeing Lufthansa shares gain quite strongly in today's session, with the prospect of that vote on the bailout going through today, as the biggest shareholder has been said to come back on side. Deutsche Lufthansa shares up more than 10%. They gained more than 20% at the open. We saw a drawdown of 2.6% on the S&P 500 yesterday. It's these fears of a resurgence of cases, particularly in the US, and the impact that might have on the easing of lockdowns that seems to be causing concerns to some of the theses out there by investors in terms of the risks of a second wave. S&P futures and Dow futures down more than 1%. The Nasdaq had its first loss in 9 sessions yesterday, and futures point to another loss, down 0.8%. The 10-year Treasury yield, what we're seeing is that dip 1 basis point towards a 66 handle. 10-year Bund yield lower by a basis point, -45. The 5-year gilt yield has hit a record low in today's session. The 10-year gilt yield down 2.5 basis points at 16 basis points. We're seeing the dollar extend its gains against G10, although it is giving up some of those gains. There's a little bit of a mixed picture, actually, in G10 currencies against the greenback. And then finally, oil. So you had the combination of stockpiles data plus second wave fears, and that means that we saw the biggest drop in almost 2 weeks yesterday, and oil extending declines. Brent lower by 0.9%, trading at $39.96 a barrel. WTI at $37.61, down more than 1%, Roger.
Right, let's go on to some of today's top stories. Now, the pandemic's continuing to spread across the US, with California, Florida and Texas each hitting a record for new cases. The University of Washington now predicts 180,000 Americans will die by October. According to Johns Hopkins, around 120,000 have died so far.
Yeah, and obviously the deaths are something that we have to consider very heavily, Roger, but also it's just the implications in terms of what happens with lockdowns, because we've had New York, New Jersey, Connecticut set quarantines for incoming travellers from hot zones, North Carolina putting its reopening on ice for 3 weeks, and in California, which saw an all-time high for new infections, Disney delaying the reopening of its theme parks indefinitely.
Now, here in the UK, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak's under pressure to open up the chequebook. British businesses are urging the government to ramp up public spending to protect jobs. The Confederation of British Industry wants an extension of grants, business rate relief and tax deferrals. The economy started a fragile recovery from the virus lockdown.
In top corporate news, Lufthansa's biggest shareholder says he'll vote in favour of the €9 billion government bailout. Billionaire Heinz Hermann Thiele told the German newspaper FAZ he'd support the package. It gives the rescue plan added momentum ahead of a crunch vote. The deal is now expected to be approved by investors. And as I was saying, Lufthansa shares actually the best performing on the Stock 600 today, up 10% right now.
And Bayer has agreed to spend more than $12 billion to put its Monsanto liabilities behind it. The deal settles 75% of Roundup cases, around 95,000. It also sets up a fund for future claims. The German chemicals firm's also resolved litigation over its dicamba herbicide and claims of toxic pollution. And right now, Bayer shares, looking at it, they're just in positive territory, not moving a great deal, up 0.8%.
Yeah, they shifted around a bit. They opened higher, then they slipped into the red. Now they're back in the green. I suppose it does raise some questions over whether this news has a glass half full or glass half empty outlook for Bayer from here. Roger.
Right, now the world's biggest hedge funds warned that the impact of the virus pandemic could last up to 2 years, potentially complicating monetary and fiscal policy efforts to bolster the economy. Speaking exclusively to John Ferro at the Bloomberg Invest Summit, Bob Prince, co-CIO of Bridgewater Associates, said there's a huge amount of uncertainty for global markets.
The actions to date are roughly appropriate. In other words, the amount of printing and the amount of fiscal stimulation has been roughly sufficient to fill the hole in incomes that was created. But not all of that money is getting spent. Let's say 50 cents on the dollar that the government is sending out is actually getting spent. And so actually you haven't had nearly as much of a improvement in spending in the economy as you've had in the liquidity in the system. In addition, the central bank is printing money over and above what it takes to finance those deficits and sending that into all kinds of assets. And so we have a major reflation going on, which has been, by and large, successful so far. The big question about that is that while we're used to thinking in terms of growth rates, which is changes in output over short periods of time, the big thing that's happening now to be thinking about is the collapse in income and the level of income that exists. Because the low level of income that exists will be with us for a while in some substantial degree, which means lower profits, lower spending, and so forth. What also means lower cash flow. And for those that are in, kind of treading on thin ice with respect to their financial position, the longer that this goes on, the more difficult it becomes for them. And so you have these two pressures really operating at the same time. You have the collapse in income, which is collapsing cash flows, which will affect those that are most vulnerable to the collapse in cash flows. And you have the expansion of liquidity by the central bank going into assets, but may not be sufficient to cover those cash flows. And the programs to date are by and large sufficient to cover the income gap for about 3 or 4 months, starting from April. So we're really talking about an amount of money that gets you through the summer. And the problem then is that we're talking about the virus, which has a time frame of probably 18 to 24 months. And so I refer to that as a duration mismatch, essentially the time frame of the virus impact on spending and income in relation to the time frame of how long people can last.
And that was Bob Prince, co-CIO of Bridgewater Associates, speaking exclusively to Bloomberg. Right, let's get the latest in global news with Leanne Gerrans. And Leanne, you begin with a growing political scandal here in Britain.
Yes, indeed, Roger. A bundle of documents have been released showing text messages between the Housing Secretary accused of cash for favours and a multi-millionaire Conservative donor. They were exchanged before Robert Jenrick approved Richard Desmond's plans for a housing development. This decision has since been reversed. Shadow's Community Secretary Steve Reed's not convinced by his counterpart's denials of bias.
The documents show that Mr. Jenrick rushed the decision through on the 14th of January, specifically so he could help Mr. Desmond avoid 30 to 50 million pounds in a community levy that would have been spent on things like schools, youth clubs and clinics.
Meanwhile, Downing Street says the Prime Minister considers the matter closed. President Trump says some of the US troops stationed in Germany will be moved to Poland after meeting with his Polish counterpart, Andrzej Duda. Bloomberg's Marek Strzelecki says it comes just days before Poland's election.
While this is in line with Duda's goal to boost U.S. military presence in Eastern European nation, the talks didn't yield breakthrough results in defense cooperation. The presidents announced that both nations will sign an agreement that will allow Poland to begin work on a nuclear power project. In Warsaw, Marek Strzelecki, Bloomberg, Daybreak Europe.
Staying in Europe, France is planning a virus furlough program that could cover a large share of lost incomes for as long as 2 years. The extension comes as the government figures out how to adapt emergency measures put in place to protect businesses and jobs during the pandemic. Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire currently forecasts that France will see an 11% GDP contraction this year. And the high mountain border clash between China and India is heating up again. Beijing is making new allegations that its neighbor provoked the clash that left at least 20 soldiers dead. The Foreign Ministry reasserted China's claim that the incident happened on the line of control and that Indian forces had entered Chinese territory illegally. The two sides have now agreed to de-escalate tensions. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you. Now here's Lewis Mason with your sport.
Liverpool will be crowned Premier League champions if Manchester City fail to beat Chelsea later. Jurgen Klopp's side beat Crystal Palace 4-0 at Anfield last night to put them on the verge of securing the title. Premier League teams are coming to terms with this week's heatwave as a packed fixture list continues. Manchester United were 3-0 winners against Sheffield United at Old Trafford last night as the UK experienced its hottest day of the year so far, with temperatures going over 32 degrees. Norwich suffered a third straight defeat as they were beaten 1-0 by Everton. They remain rooted to the bottom of the Premier League, 6 points adrift of safety. However, manager Daniel Farke isn't giving up hope of them pulling off the Great Escape just yet. Elsewhere in the relegation battle, Bournemouth lost 1-0 to Wolves and Aston Villa picked up an away point at Newcastle. The Premier League has launched a reporting system for players, managers and their families to use if they're victims of online discrimination. And Kyle Edmund fought back from a set down to beat Andy Murray and claim a place in the semi-finals of the Battle of the Brits tennis tournament.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Are you looking for senior care for your mom or dad but don't know where to start? Hi, I'm Jen London with A Place for Mom. Nobody knows your parent or loved one better than you, and nobody knows senior living better than the experts at A Place for Mom. It's a free service, and we've helped thousands of families find the right place for their mom or dad. There's a place for answers, A Place for Mom. Call today.
Call A Place for Mom at 1-800-391-1755. That's 1-800-391-1755.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Elite advisory firm.
Different adapts, different overcomes, different keeps moving, different keeps thinking, different stays connected, different never stops dreaming. The University of Northampton invites you to a virtual open day for a taste of all the benefits of studying with us from this September. Search University of Northampton Virtual Open Days. It's the future, but different.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath? Or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway? Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage? Yeah, that moment. Feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We can replace your battery at over 700 stores and garages, or even at your home or work with our mobile experts, so you can enjoy an engine that starts first time, every time, and start enjoying the open road again.
Are we nearly there yet?
From battery replacements to tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are
ploughing on, boxing up goods and rolling them out, shipping kettles,
instruments to kids,
art for walls,
treats to pets, shorts for sunny weekends,
to brighten up one British home at a time.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
The Mini Electric was raring to go until ready, set, stop. We hit the power down switch. We waited. But now it's time to start up again. We're ready with the Mini Electric and whole Mini range online. Showroom safety measures are set, and we're feeling good to go. Find your perfect Mini at mini.co.uk.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing, so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
From all of us at Thames Water, thank you for supporting our key workers. As the weather warms up, demand for our water is growing, so we need your help more than ever. From taking shorter showers to turning off your sprinklers, you can make every drop count, inside and outside your home, to keep taps flowing in your community. Just don't forget to keep washing your hands regularly in line with government advice. Be an H2O hero. Find out how at thameswater.co.uk/watersmart.
At Tesco, we've price matched Aldi on hundreds of products like bananas, peppers, chicken breasts, tomatoes, Warburton's bread, strawberries, even avocados. That's Tesco products at Aldi prices. Because now more than ever, every little helps. Tesco. Prices checked on comparable products from GBLD stores and online twice weekly. Price most often found matched excluding promotions. Selected Tesco stores excluding Express and all Northern Ireland stores. Products and their availability vary weekly and by store. Details at tesco.com/Aldi price match.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from London. I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Now, it's a risk-off day as investor concerns following a spike in virus infections in the US sent stocks lower. The FTSE leading declines here in Europe down 1% at the moment. The CAC 40 sliding 0.9. The Stock 600 down 0.7%, and the DAX down 0.4% this morning. US futures also pointing to a lower open. In stock specifics, I'm keeping a close eye on Lufthansa, rallying as much as 12% in Frankfurt, as there are suggestions that the airline's biggest shareholder will approve the bailout by the German government in today's vote. So something to keep a close eye on as that gets underway today. Wirecard, on the other hand, slipping 17%. This as Philippine authorities launch a hunt into Wirecard's former number 2 in their fraud probe. So continuing unraveling of the saga when it comes to Wirecard. Now, the negative sentiment in the markets is sending havens like the greenback higher. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up 0.1%. The yen holding at 107.1. Sterling bid at 124. The euro standing pat at 112 this morning. We are seeing sovereign bonds bid with 10-year treasury yields lower by 2 basis points at 66 basis points. Similarly so for German Bund yields, with the 10-year at negative 46. 10-year gilt yields falling 3 basis points to 16 basis points this morning. Gold is also higher, up 0.4 at $1,700 weekend, $68 a troy ounce. And we are seeing oil lower today amid concerns over the virus and growing US stockpiles. WTI at 20 cents a barrel, while Brent is below 40 at the moment. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. The pandemic is continuing to spread across the US, with California, Florida and Texas each hitting a record for new cases. The University of Washington now predicts 180,000 will die from October. According to Johns Hopkins, around 120,000 have died so far. Officials in Houston, Texas say the city may exceed intensive care capacity as soon as today. Here in the UK, human trials have begun of a new potential coronavirus vaccine. That's today. Volunteers are receiving doses being developed by researchers at Imperial College London. About 300 volunteers are taking part in the study, which is the second vaccine trial on humans underway in the UK. And this morning, the Eiffel Tower in Paris has reopened, but visitors must take the stairs. The lifts will remain closed until the 1st of July as a social distancing precaution. This means the very top of the tower remains out of bounds. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, I feel like we heard this story a few days ago. What's changed? Is it the date?
It was a few weeks ago, wasn't it? I was also thinking that, and I checked that out. That was a few weeks ago, but it was the date that's changed as they try to put coronavirus measures in place to keep everybody safe. But they have been saying for a long time that you won't be able to get into lifts because that is just seen as a little bit dangerous right now.
Yeah, but it's also a lot healthier to use the stairs, isn't it? I mean, have you gone on the stairs of the Eiffel Tower?
I have done, yes. I climbed them, but I climbed them when I was very small. So I climbed the Eiffel Tower when I think I was about 10. I can't remember now. But I just looked up how many stairs there are, and there's only 1,710 stairs.
Only 1,710? Sounds like quite a lot.
I don't think that's a lot.
It's not. I mean, I've always taken the stairs in the tube, and some of those tube stairs are almost 300.
Covent Garden.
Times that by 3. You know, it's not that bad, really.
No, it's not. Covent Garden stairs are
exactly. I always used to take those.
Always take
the
those.
days when we took the tube, eh? All right, Leanne Gerrans with the World News. Thank you so much. Now, Simon French, Chief Economist at Panmure Gordon, joins us down the line. Simon, great to catch up with you as always. We got a little bit of a wake-up call in equity markets yesterday. It seems to be carrying through into the session today as well, with resurgence of cases, particularly in some hotspots in the US, but also concerns in Australia and other parts of the world, in Latin America as well, for example. We heard from David Solomon, Goldman Sachs CEO, at the Bloomberg Invest Global Summit, saying that equity markets, the rebound that we've seen, has gotten out of step, and we might see a rebalancing coming in equity markets. Do you expect that as well, and to what degree?
Morning there. Look, I don't. I disagree with David on that one. Why? Because actually equity markets are not taking their cue from the real economy and economic activity. They're taking their cue from the near $5 trillion worth of asset purchases that have taken place by central banks over the last quarter. And if we see a secondary set of spikes that precipitate a second lockdown in significant parts of the global economy, I mean, I throw the question back at you. Do you think that Jay Powell, Governor Kuroda, Christine Lagarde will sit on their hands during this? I don't.
Ooh, disagreeing with David Solomon and throwing the question back at me. Love it, love it, Simon. Go for it, Rog.
Well, all right. I don't really have a view on this, I have to say. But let's talk about Simon. You mentioned the QE there. You mentioned the ways in which the central banks are working on this. What about the other factors that come through as a result of that, including a lot of people talking about zombie companies going around? They're also talking about the risks further down the line of inflation. I mean, this is policy that doesn't entirely go without risk.
Absolutely, and one of the problems of doing this policy of inoculating investors against downside risk is that you build up financial risks, probably not in the bank sector, but probably in the non-bank sector. You continue and extend that slightly dangerous search for yield amongst less sophisticated investors. Yes, it is not without a potential inflationary spike down the track, although personally I'm of the view that deflation is the bigger risk than inflation. But you're right to say that this is not without its long-term challenges. The issue is, right now, in a crisis, what are central banks and fiscal policymakers doing? They are throwing the kitchen sink at it, and you're a brave investor to think that they're going to stop or indeed take a different policy response if in the event of a second lockdown that will precipitate more policy support.
So, Simon, let me pick up on that question that you threw back at me then in terms of whether I think there's a lot of throwing, mudslinging going on in today's conversation. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. Look, so you asked me, do I think that Jay Powell, other central bankers would sit on their hands if things got worse and we got a second wave? I mean, it makes me think of what we heard from Manny Roman of PIMCO this week also, who said what's more important from the Fed is simply the signalling rather than what they're actually doing, particularly around corporate bond purchases. So my question to you would be, if, as I think your question suggested, you think we will see a lot more, what would we see if we got such a serious second wave that perhaps some form of lockdowns were precipitated? Will we get more action or simply just signalling that there could be more to come?
Well, to some degree, that will depend on the scale of the lockdown, whether they are localized in certain US states, certain regions in Europe where the ramp up in test and trace capability means that you can segment parts of the economy rather than whole economies, whole countries. But to answer the question around, what does the toolkit look like? It is clearly partly, forward guidance and signalling that you will be prepared to move up the risk spectrum. And we've seen from the comments of the Fed that the markets just run ahead of that and anticipate action. Now, of course, if things get sufficiently bad that they need to follow through with those actions and indeed go further up the risk spectrum, then yes, it goes back to Roger's point of you start to build greater risks with a riskier portfolio being held by central banks. But I don't think they are unprepared to do that. I think they are, and they'll deal with the consequences as and when the immediate COVID crisis has blown through.
Simon, let me take you off that to perhaps back to your previous career. You were, of course, in the Cabinet Office as Chief of Staff to the government. I mean, these are the kind of issues that you might have been dealing with if you've been there in this situation. But the CBI really putting pressure on Rishi Sunak now to open up the checkbook, ramp up public spending. They say that's the way out. Do you agree?
On the basis that fiscal expansionism now to offset weak private demand is just good policy making, then yes, on a macro sense, do I agree the government should be taking a bigger role, and at the summer update in the middle of July, and again in the spending review, and again in the November budget, should it be stimulative? Yes, I think it should. I think my interest is how you stimulate. Not all fiscal expansions are made equal. Will we see a VAT cut in the UK? I personally think that would be unwise. We're not consumption deficient, we're consumption constrained. What we need to do is ensure that the economy can adjust to new patterns of demand, and that may well mean a national insurance cut for employers to try and encourage a job-rich recovery.
Simon French, great to have you with us today, as always. Thank you so much. Chief Economist at Panmure Gordon. And Simon goes on to TV, where you can hear much more from him in the next hour on surveillance. In the meantime, Roger, we were talking about risk-off in the session today. It's certainly not as pronounced in Europe as it was yesterday. We saw declines of 2.8% on the Stock 600 yesterday. Right now, we're down 0.7%. And US futures lower as well. S&P E-minis down 1.25 percentage points, Rog.
Yeah, it does definitely look as if the risk-off sentiment's going towards the US side of it. We'll see how all that works out and how seriously people take what David Solomon said. Big part of what we've been talking about this morning. This is Bloomberg.
Pressure on profits? Call GEP.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Thursday morning by the scruff of the neck. Take this sunshine as an omen and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath? Or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway? Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage? Yeah, that moment feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We can replace your battery at over 700 stores and garages, or even at your home or work with our mobile experts, so you can enjoy an engine that starts first time, every time, and start enjoying the open road again.
Are we nearly there yet?
From battery replacements to tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
Hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
The idea is to really hold the economy in suspended animation until we get control of this virus.
We are very much in a picture of monetary dominance.
We will get slower growth. I mean, let's not get confused about that.
We are in a national crisis. I think it is for all parties to pull together.
The euro area is facing an economic contraction of a magnitude and speed that are unprecedented in peacetime.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning from London. I'm Anna Edwards.
And from the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin, I'm Matt Miller. You're listening to Daybreak Europe on London DAB Digital Radio.
You are listening to Daybreak Europe, and let's start with European equity markets then, Matt, in our data check. We check the data every 15 minutes here on Bloomberg Radio, and the Stock 600 is down 0.6%, but off lows previously seen in the session. So we were down by more than 1% on some of these markets. The Xetra DAX has always been a relative bright spot in the first hour of the trading day, but the Stock 600 then down 0.6%. The FTSE 100 down a little more severely than that, down around 0.9%. In terms of what we're seeing in other assets, then we also see this kind of risk-off move coming through in US futures. US futures down more than 1%. And remember, this is in the context of some heavy selling in yesterday's session. European equity markets suffering losses, down more than 3% for some of these equity markets, all due to concerns, ongoing concerns, revived concerns around the spread of coronavirus in the United States in particular, and the way that we can handle more localized flare-ups in Europe and in parts of Asia as well. The oil price also retreats with other risk assets, so Brent is down by 2% at $39.50. We do see some appetite for gold, $17.66, up 0.3%. We spoke to our colleague Eddie van der Walt of the MLive team earlier on, Matt, and he was saying it could go higher still. The dollar is performing that haven status this morning. It is catching a bid. It is up around 0.2%, whether you look at the dollar index or the Bloomberg dollar index, and that is the extent of it, really, when it comes to these markets. A sort of classic risk-off day, very much about the virus.
Yeah, risk off for sure. That tone dominating, regardless, really, of where you look. We want to talk about this with our next guest. She joined us on television. She's actually fairly sanguine, saying she sees lots of positive economic surprises as well. Shanti Kellerman joins us, investment director from Brown Shipley. Shanti, where do you see positive economic surprises? What makes you what gives you reason for a little bit more optimism?
So there's a lot of, if you look at the data, we kind of underestimated on the way down how fast things were deteriorating and how bad things were. And part of it's just because this is unprecedented. We don't really have good ways to forecast. But what we've seen as things have started to sort of repair and get better is that, things like we had the positive jobs report in the U.S. that surprised everyone a few weeks ago. Flash PMIs yesterday were a bit better than everyone thought. And it's not everything, but we're starting to see things adapting perhaps quicker than we expected. It's going to take time, of course, but we also have unprecedented amounts of support from governments, and we think that those governments will, continue to support the economy and sort of act as that cushion. I think that's probably the big difference versus you think about 2008, is we've had we don't have any huge imbalances or bubbles in the system when we started, and B, we've had very quick responses from governments.
We're just getting a red headline across the Bloomberg, which I just want to bring to everyone's attention. The ECB saying that its repo facility, repurchase facility, will provide liquidity to non-euro area central banks. I suppose this is part of a trend of central banks improving swap lines between each other, improving liquidity throughout the financial system so that we don't see pockets of stress emerging. Shanti, how do you assess what the ECB is doing to support the Eurozone economy? Do you think that we've passed the peak of what the ECB needs to do, or is it all very much dependent on these second wave concerns?
Well, it does depend how we move forward. I mean, we've seen positive data in several countries in Europe looking towards opening. We think that the recovery fund that's proposed, that involves having debt issued by the EU and then doing mostly grants to countries, we think that would be a game changer in terms of moving Europe a little bit closer towards cooperating fiscally. We think that people probably underestimate Europe's ability to integrate further, and it's usually you have these crisis movements where they enable them to kind of get over the line and move forward. We think that could add a lot to GDP in the long run. And we also think that, there's always this kind of discount around European equities for the, potential of a breakup. And if they are able to pass this, then we think some of that kind of risk premium that's applied to European equity markets might recede and lead to, hot trading on higher valuations.
Anna was just talking about the ECB maybe providing swap lines or liquidity to non-euro area banks. Of course, the Fed has done that in spades, right? Which is one of the reasons we've seen the dollar come off recent highs. Do you expect that to continue? I mean, as the Fed provides liquidity, as the Fed adds to its balance sheet, as U.S. stimulus increases, do you think the dollar is going to continue to come down?
We think the dollar will weaken, and some of that is due to just, as you said, the massive amounts of currency that they're printing. The fact that they have, things like these lines enabled means that countries have better access to dollars, so you see less sort of demand and buying them on the open market. If you think about the world we live in today, everything's very connected, and I think we haven't had perfect coordination, but you do see central banks recognizing that for things to be okay in their backyard, they've got to be okay in someone else's backyard, and I think that's why we've seen cooperation and recognition that everyone's better off working together.
Maybe that's been a feature of the central banking response, at least. Where do you have conviction at the moment, then, Shanti, in terms of an investment strategy? It's very easy to be subsumed by negativity around the virus, but there are opportunities to invest at this point. So where do you see those?
Yeah, so we have our two highest equity convictions are technology and the healthcare sector, and those were both things we had before this virus hit. But we took the opportunity to increase our exposure to those areas. We think that, we've had the technology stocks and a lot of, the online and digital services have been given a sort of, boost, and that's accelerating much more rapidly. Healthcare continues to be sort of a solid defensive play, but also secular growth opportunities in terms of, aging populations, rising demand for healthcare. On the fixed income side, we like hard currency, emerging market debt. While debt levels, are fairly high, the index and that sort of exposure is fairly well balanced, and overall debt servicing levels and interest rates are lower. We think they're manageable. And we also like European high yield. That's an area where leverage in the Euro high yield space is not as high as it is in the U.S. space. And we also see some upside from the support that the European Central Bank is doing for European companies.
What do you think of, as you know, Shanti, I care about car makers. What do you think about European versus U.S. Auto names? You know, Volkswagen or Daimler compared to, say, Ford or General Motors?
The car industry is in a difficult place because they have a lot of disruption. They've got incredibly high development costs if you look at the cost to develop a new vehicle. And I think, I will answer your question, but just first, I think the trend is going to be more, you saw more mergers, more joint ventures, because that's just the only way those firms are going to be able to stump up the amount of capital needed to develop vehicles. I think you are starting to see some of the European car makers adapt to things like electric cars, but it's going to be a slow process, and they're quite a ways behind, the companies like Tesla, which are a leader in that space. You'll probably see more government support, I think, in Europe than you will in the U.S. But it's hard to say. I think all of those companies are going to struggle, and unless we get increased demand from everyone moving to the suburbs and deciding they need a vehicle, which some of that might happen, but probably not enough to bring demand back to where it was 10, 15 years ago.
Shanti, thanks very much. Thanks for joining us. Shanti Kellerman, Brown Shipley Investment Director.
All right, let's get to Leanne Gerrans now with your World National News headlines. Leanne?
Good morning, Matt. The pandemic is continuing to spread across the U.S., with California, Florida and Texas each hitting a record for new cases. The University of Washington now predicts 180,000 will die by October. According to Johns Hopkins, around 120,000 have died so far. Officials in Houston, Texas say the city may exceed intensive care capacity as soon as today. Now, here in the UK, the Housing Secretary is facing calls to resign after releasing documents and text messages about a controversial planning application. These messages were exchanged before Robert Jenrick approved Conservative donor Richard Desmond's plans for a housing development. Jenrick's been accused of cash for favours by the opposition Labour Party. Speaking in the Commons yesterday, Jenrick denied any wrongdoing.
Contrary to the wild accusations propagated by the honourable gentleman opposite and restated today in a series of totally inaccurate statements and comments, this was a decision taken with an open mind on the merits of the case.
Meanwhile, Downing Street says the Prime Minister considers the matter is closed. President Trump has said some US troops currently stationed in Germany will be relocated to Poland, reiterating his criticism of Berlin's defense spending. He also announced that the US and Poland will begin work on a nuclear project. The US president met with his Polish counterpart Andrzej Duda yesterday, who has previously emphasized the need for US troops in Europe to maintain security. And Australia has posted its biggest one-day spike in coronavirus cases in 2 months, heightening concerns of a second wave. Bloomberg's Jason Scott reports.
The nation's tally of 37 on Thursday, 33 of those in Victoria State, is the highest daily total since April 19. Australia has managed to limit the total number of coronavirus cases to less than 8,000. But as lockdown controls ease, Victoria State has now experienced a double-digit increase in cases for 9 straight days. In Canberra, Jason Scott, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Anna.
Leanne, thanks very much. Now with your morning sports news, here's Lewis Mason, starting with a key moment in the recently reopened Premier League.
Liverpool will be crowned Premier League champions if Manchester City fail to beat Chelsea later. Jurgen Klopp's side beat Crystal Palace 4-0 at Anfield last night to put them on the verge of securing the title. Premier League teams are coming to terms with this week's heatwave as a packed fixture list continues. Manchester United were 3-0 winners against Sheffield United at Old Trafford last night as the UK experienced its hottest day of the year so far, with temperatures going over 32 degrees. Norwich suffered a third straight defeat as they were beaten 1-0 by Everton. They remain rooted to the bottom of the Premier League, 6 points adrift of safety. However, manager Daniel Farke isn't giving up hope of them pulling off the Great Escape just yet. Elsewhere Elsewhere in the relegation battle, Bournemouth lost 1-0 to Wolves and Aston Villa picked up an away point at Newcastle. The Premier League has launched a reporting system for players, managers and their families to use if they're victims of online discrimination. And Kyle Edmund fought back from a set down to beat Andy Murray and claim a place in the semi-finals of the Battle of the Brits tennis tournament.
All right, that was your sports report. Still ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. You know, one of the things we were talking about with Shanti Kellerman earlier was whether or not she thinks that central banks and governments will end their stimulus too early, as we get the IMF forecast now that the global economy will contract by 4.9% this year. That is a huge contraction, the likes of which we really haven't seen since the 1930s. We'll talk about it next with Dan Moss. This is Bloomberg.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. NJIT faculty mentored Christoph Camacho when he was a student, helping him co-found a startup and patent a device that uses drone technology for reforestation and to collect valuable data for land management.
I founded Paratrees back in 2016, taking what I learned from my research at NJIT and migrating it to a startup. Our technology is to really enhance land management operations, so we work very closely with land management companies. So we have a drone that performs precision reforestation, and we do storm damage assessment, having access to drones that can collect data so it's much faster. And what is more important, we help them drive management decisions. NJIT has been there every step of the way, going full force with my company.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
The Boston Symphony Orchestra presents BSO at Home. While you stay inside, enjoy a curated collection of archived concerts and behind-the-scenes stories from BSO musicians. BSO Homeschool provides lessons for music lovers of all ages. New performances and messages from musicians are added regularly. Enjoy these selections and much more at bso.org/at-home.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Emily Chang.
Leaders across Silicon Valley are among the biggest critics against President Trump's decision to temporarily halt guest worker visas to the United States, which are widely used across Silicon Valley. One executive familiar with the immigrant experience and its contributions to the tech industry is Ilya Fushman, partner and managing member at Kleiner Perkins and a former executive at Dropbox. What's your take on the social and economic impact of this, not knowing how long these visas will be suspended?
It's important, it's personal, not just for me, but for our firm. And I think it has tremendous impact on our industry and really the economy as a whole. I immigrated to the U.S. in the 90s on a J-1 visa. I became a citizen in 2003. Mamoon Hamid and Wanshay, my partners, came out on H-1B visas. More interestingly, about 50% of our portfolio company founders are immigrants. And in our most recent few funds, that number is somewhere between 60 and 70%. These are obviously household names like Google and Slack, but are also some amazing new coming companies like Nova Credit, Plastic, Netlify. These are companies that are helping immigrants, that are helping small businesses, that are building the next generation of enterprise software companies. And overall, there are about 3 million immigrant entrepreneurs in the U.S.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin, I'm Matt Miller, and this is a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. We are seeing a turn higher in European equity indexes. They were down across the board just minutes ago. Then we got an announcement that the ECB is going to provide additional liquidity to non-euro area banks. And we see now, for example, European continental equity indexes all rising. The CAC 40 in Paris up only 0.2%, but a green arrow nonetheless. The DAX in Frankfurt up 0.7%, and the IBEX 35 in Madrid up 0.5%. The FTSE is still down, but only, by less than 0.1%. So down 3 points to 61.21, and it looks like it's getting ready to rise as it erases its losses almost completely now. In terms of other risk indicators, we do see bond yields rising back to level right now at negative 45 basis points, gilt yields rising to 17 basis points, and U.S. Treasuries, although investors are still buying the paper net, we're seeing the yield come back a little bit to 66.92. The dollar is stronger against the yen. It can now buy 107.164 yen for your dollar, but weaker against the pound. Right now, British pound is going for 124.51, so rising in dollar terms. We see Brent crude down below $40 a barrel, right now trading for $39.92. You also see NYMEX WTI down 37.55, the price per barrel. And that is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Now back over to Leanne Gerrans with some more global news headlines. Leanne?
Matt, thanks. Here in the UK, many parents may struggle to find childcare when they return to work as the lockdown eases. This comes as nurseries are warning of mass closures. England's early years providers have been operating at 37% of their capacity since early June, according to a report from CEDA. Research shows they face huge losses if this continues. Urgent government intervention has been called for. South Africa has reported a record 5,688 new coronavirus cases. This marks the most in Africa and a fifth consecutive day of new cases surpassing 4,000. Yesterday, the number of people who died after contracting the virus in the nation rose by more than 100 for a second day. And in Russia, President Vladimir Putin has put the country's military might on display despite the coronavirus. Yesterday, a parade featuring 14,000 troops and weaponry took place to mark the 75th anniversary of the World War II defeat of Nazi Germany. The event took place a week before a vote on changing the constitution. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It is 9:20 in the city. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. We're joined today by opinion columnist Dan Moss, who's writing about the importance of central banks, particularly in Asia, sticking to the stimulus before meaningful recovery has arrived. And you're focused on Asia. I can think of a couple of European examples where this is interesting. The recent conversation around the Bank of England talking about exit from extraordinary policy even before we've maybe finished doing the extraordinary policy. The ECB has an announcement out this morning. What's your focus then from an Asian perspective, Dan?
The key context for this is the first shared global economic event, arguably since 1945. There is no region of the world that is not in recession. The new IMF forecasts released yesterday in Washington underscored that. Asia has no patrons. Its patrons were China, Japan, and the United States. China's no longer powering away forever into the happiness. Last time Asia had a financial crisis, the US had a tech boom. None of those things are happening. So no country will get Asia out of this. This means it has to be policy.
Yeah, this became really clear to me, Dan, when I saw the IMF forecast yesterday with a chart going back 40 years. And this year is going to be really the only time we've had a real contraction in global growth. I mean, even 2009, I think it was a slight contraction, but it wasn't everywhere. And I think in your column, maybe you point out that someone recently suggested it shouldn't be called the global financial crisis, or shouldn't have been called that, but rather the North American financial crisis. Do you see too many central bankers talking about pulling back already? Too many governments ending their fiscal stimulus ambitions already as this economy really starts to get hit?
You know, it's a subtle thing, Matt. I'm not hearing central bankers talking about the end of stimulus. That would be crazy, and nobody's doing it. You are seeing what might be seen as the first flares of a coming battle about how long do we keep this up for and what are the boundaries. We've heard noises like that from the Bank of Korea. We've heard them from the Philippines. Certainly the Bank of England's Bloomberg opinion column the other day might fit into that category. You know, one of the great successes, if that doesn't sound ironic, of this current downturn is how quickly monetary policy leapt into the breach, not just in its magnitude, but in its geographic reach and in the type of things it did. Now, fiscal came a little later, but it still has been quite expansionary. And look, just again, it's more of a sense of, are we at peak stimulus here rather than withdrawal? And, you know, history shows us from the last downturn, once you start talking about peak, you're not too far off a discussion about, well, how do we wind this back? That's treacherous territory.
Okay, Dan, thanks very much. Thanks for explaining your piece to us this morning. Bloomberg opinion columnist Dan Moss with us to discuss the extent to which central banks need to remain committed to helping their economies get out of the crisis. You can find more stories from the Bloomberg opinion team at bloomberg.com/opinion and on the terminal by typing OPIN GO. This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Charlie Pellet. The New York City Marathon, the world's biggest, has been canceled because of the coronavirus. The 26.2-mile race, which would have celebrated its 50th anniversary in November, attracts more than 50,000 runners and about 1 million spectators. It is one of the city's biggest events of the year and a major event for business. Lakers guard Avery Bradley has decided to sit out the NBA's upcoming resumption of the season in Florida. He told ESPN this week he wants to remain with his wife and 3 children, including a 6-year-old son who has a history of respiratory illnesses. By sitting out, Bradley figures to lose a projected $650,000 in salary. And the U.S. National Soccer Hall of Fame has postponed its 2020 ceremony to 2021 because of the coronavirus pandemic. And that's the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report. I'm Charlie Pellet.
If knowledge is power, the Bloomberg Terminal is your power up, connecting you to real-time financial data, market-moving news, powerful analytics, and an influential network of financial decision makers around the world. Share ideas, negotiate trades, and gain the insight you need to make more informed decisions. See how the terminal can take your workflow to the next level at Bloomberg.com/professional.
If you're having a business dispute, you know time is money. The longer your case proceeds, the more your case can cost. So speed up your resolution with the American Arbitration Association. Arbitration with the American Arbitration Association is faster. In fact, the median time frame for an American Arbitration Association B2B arbitration to be awarded is nearly 16 months faster than the U.S. courts. ADR.org. Resolve.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Thursday morning by the scruff of the neck. Take this sunshine as an omen and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath? Or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway? Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage? Yeah, that moment feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We can replace your battery at over 700 stores and garages, or even at your home or work with our mobile experts, so you can enjoy an engine that starts first time, every time, and start enjoying the open road again.
Are we nearly there yet?
From battery replacements to tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are
ploughing on, boxing up goods and rolling them out, shipping kettles,
instruments to kids,
art for walls,
treats to pets, shorts for sunny weekends,
to brighten up one British home at a time.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
At Honda, we've never looked to other car companies for inspiration. No, it's not a matter of an inflated ego. We just prefer listening to what people really need. For example, the new Honda Jazz Hybrid doesn't have the expected 6 airbags. It has 10, including one that prevents the driver and passenger from colliding with each other. And because we also listen to our conscience, all our safety features come as standard. No charge. Honda, the power of dreams.
Casting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good morning from the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Anna Edwards. Welcome to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. Let's talk about where we are on these markets. We'll dwell a little more on the Wirecard story, but some really interesting lines coming through on Wirecard. Matt Miller was just going through a few of them with us. Wirecard applies for the opening of insolvency proceedings. Shares are suspended at, from around 10 minutes ago, it seems. Those shares in Wirecard listed in Germany, applying then for insolvency proceedings. We're going to be talking more about the German corporate news flow, of which there is plenty this morning in just a few minutes' time. Let's get back to the data then, Matt. And what was a very negative session has turned much more positive. Europe sold off more than the US in the end yesterday. And so perhaps it made sense that we were a little more positive in today's session. But that didn't stop us going to the downside by more than 1% in the first hour of the trading day. But now an hour and a half in and things have changed a little bit. And we're now up by 0.25% on the Stock 600. The Xetra DAX very much helping us get there, along with the IBEX. The FTSE 100 is a laggard, down around 0.1%. US futures, though, do suggest there'll be negativity ahead. Big US indexes certainly pointing to the downside right now. Thank you. Here at Bloomberg, we say indexes are not indices, and Matt likes to remind me of this. So there we are on the outlook for US stocks. Then, Matt, it is negative as we, in an ongoing fashion, continue to focus on the cases of coronavirus in the United States, in particular in Florida, in California, in Texas. All of these hotspots very much at the forefront of investors' minds, and so we generally have seen risk off this morning, but some of that has turned around, in part because we've got these lines from the ECB, their repo facility to provide liquidity to non-euro area central banks. So just trying to make sure that liquidity gets to all the parts of the economy that it needs to, I suppose, there, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. We got those lines really at the same time that the market started to turn positive. So that repo facility line, the ECB going to provide extra liquidity, came across the terminal at 10:02. And within 5 minutes, the Stoxx 600, which was already heading up, to be fair, crossed the line and turned green. I think there really have been two big threads, though, Anna, today in terms of news driving markets. One is the increase in COVID cases, especially in the U.S. And the other is just a ton of German corporate news. You've got the Wirecard now filing for insolvency, certainly at the top of the list. But Lufthansa looking more likely to get its €9 billion bailout, and Bayer spending over $12 billion to try and limit the damage from Roundup cases. Let's get over to our senior editor in that case here in Berlin, Benedict Kamel, to talk to us about some of these stories. And Benny, now I think we really should start with Wirecard, because it looks like, they are starting their insolvency filings. It looks like this company could go bust.
Yes, very much so. So 2 minutes ago, thereabouts, the headlines crossed the Bloomberg saying that Wirecard is applying for an insolvency proceeding, and this is obviously a very rapid demise of quick development. This morning we were talking about banks still assessing the situation, possibly extending credit lines, and it looks, we don't know yet, but it looks as if those talks didn't go the way they should for Wirecard, and then there was really no other route than to file for insolvency. So this is really an unprecedented implosion of a company of this size. We've seen obviously a string of insolvencies in Germany, but nothing of this caliber.
And this has real significance because of the way that Wirecard was regarded, I suppose, in the German corporate world. It was an exciting tech story, which maybe Europe doesn't have enough of. And it recently was promoted to the Xetra DAX because such was its rise.
Exactly. So the rise and fall is really quite startling. This is a company that had been around for a long time and had been around since 2002, so almost 2 decades, but had sort of managed a steady ascent over the years, really became a pillar of electronic payment transactions, big partners, Visa, MasterCard, and so on. So really a viable business, and that was reflected in the stock price, which for many years really only knew one direction, and then trouble really started for them around the time they managed this ascent into the DAX, because that's when the articles in the FT started surfacing that something was amiss here, that there was accounting questions were swirling, and it's something that they've never really managed to recover from since.
Yeah, I mean, I learned from BN reporting that they also have a pretty big bank business. I hadn't realized so many people were making deposits into the Wirecard bank and may have been spooked, although to be fair, and before we start a run, we should point out that they have the same kind of protections you would have in any other bank. I think you can even hold up to like 19.6 million euros without worrying about it, because it's secured by a number of other banks in cooperation. Still, you got to think that many people aren't going to want to do business with Wirecard anymore.
Well, certainly after the insolvency headlines crossed the wire, I mean, that probably is an unrecoverable situation for this company. And yes, they were really an integral part of global payment, but particularly Visa and MasterCard will take a very hard look at this company going forward and wonder, do we want to do business with them? And this really can very quickly become a cascading effect. And the damage really on the corporate scene, on the German corporate scene, is huge. The head of BaFin earlier this week said it's a total disaster, not least for his own house, because they didn't manage to they didn't manage to prove the allegations that were out there, and the allegations did exist. So it's not a huge surprise.
Another interesting corporate story out of Germany this morning is Lufthansa. The Lufthansa share price up by nearly 16%, Benny, and all of this because of a change of heart from one of their biggest shareholders.
Yes, so Hans-Hermann Thiele, who is the biggest shareholder in Lufthansa. He's a somewhat reclusive billionaire, and earlier in the week, as we were heading into this shareholder meeting to vote on the bailout, it looked as if he might deny his backing for the deal, and his backing is crucial just because he has such a sort of weight in the company, because a lot of shareholders aren't showing up for this meeting today, and that sort of accentuates his role. And he said that he's not in favor of this deal, and that really spooked investors quite a lot, because the alternative would have been, again, insolvency. So we might have had two major companies today filing for insolvency. It looks as if it's only one at the moment with Wirecard, and that Lufthansa has managed to escape that fate, and that the bailout that the government orchestrated a couple of weeks ago will go through.
It's a really fascinating story. I mean, this billionaire has built up his stake in Lufthansa to, I think, more than 15% since March. And because only 38% of shareholders registered to vote at the EGM, that makes his stake mathematically worth 41% of the vote. So he had a huge say, and this definitely changes things for Lufthansa. Not that we would have had to ever worry about Lufthansa flying, because it's the only way to fly around. There is no other competitive airline in Germany. It's a total monopoly. Benny, thanks so much for joining us. Benedict Kamel there, senior editor at Bloomberg, talking to us about some of the biggest stories in Germany. Let's get to Leanne Gerrans for some of the biggest stories elsewhere on the globe. Leanne?
Matt, thank you. Let's start in the US. A grim milestone for a number of states. California, Florida and Texas each set records for new coronavirus cases yesterday, and Arizona hit a peak in hospitalizations. The new number reflects a virus spread in some states that was slow to enforce lockdowns or quick to lift them. Meanwhile, a new model predicts a death toll will hit 180,000 by October. Now, here in the UK, a bundle of documents have been released showing text messages between the Housing Secretary accused of cash for favours and a multi-millionaire Conservative donor. They were exchanged before Robert Jenrick approved Richard Desmond's plans for a housing development. This decision has since been reversed. Shadow Community Secretary Steve Reed's not convinced by his counterpart's denial of bias.
The documents show that Mr. Jenrick rushed the decision through on the 14th of January, specifically so he could help Mr. Desmond avoid £30 to £50 million in a community levy that would have been spent on things like schools, youth clubs and clinics.
Meanwhile, Downing Street says the Prime Minister considers the matter closed. President Trump says some of the US troops stationed in Germany will be moved to Poland after meeting with his Polish counterpart. Bloomberg's Marek Strzelecki says it comes just days before Poland's election.
While this is in line with Duda's goal to boost U.S. military presence in Eastern European nation, the talks didn't yield breakthrough results in defense cooperation. The presidents announced that both nations will sign an agreement that will allow Poland to begin work on a nuclear power project. In Warsaw, Marek Strzelecki, Bloomberg, Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Tech by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
You're fierce. You take care of business and don't hold back. Taking care of your health shouldn't be any different. You know when something's off. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, and rashes. Listen to your body. It could be lupus. We're here to help you take control. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Who's in your corner? At Commonwealth Financial Network, our advisors would say we are. Our supportive environment lets you be true to yourself, and our culture of accountability means we don't just ask for your feedback. We act on it, so we can deliver the solutions you need to enrich the lives of your clients and build the business you've always dreamed of. Ready to discover the difference? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion or your race, or because you have children
or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit hud.gov/fairhousing. That's hud.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers...
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Thursday morning by the scruff of the neck. Take this sunshine as an omen and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like when your week off is forecast warm and sunny. Or when there's an extra unclaimed sausage left on the barbecue. Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that feeling. Nice, isn't it? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We fit car tyres for over 500,000 customers every year. We could fit yours at one of over 350 garages, or even on your driveway with our mobile experts, which means you can safely hit the road again and surprise that special someone.
Happy birthday!
From tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
The Mini Electric was raring to go until ready, set, stop. We hit the power down switch. We waited. But now it's time to start up again. We're ready with the Mini Electric and whole Mini range online. Showroom safety measures are set and we're feeling good to go. Find your perfect Mini at mini.co.uk.
When you're buying tech online and you want to make sure you get exactly what you need, would you rather talk to a robot or to someone called Robert or Jack or Miguel or Haley or one of our other tech experts on Shop Live, Curry's PC World's online video call experience?
Hi, it's Ali. What are you searching for?
Isn't it nice to get expert advice from another human being before you buy? They're just a click away. Curry's PC World. Talk to our tech experts online with Shop Live.
It could be a first-timer or a long-timer or a once-in-a-whiler. It could be a little or a lot. It could be the ticket under your fridge magnet. It could be someone with your first name and last and middle. It could be you. This Saturday's £15 million lotto jackpot must be won, or thousands of you will win a share of the jackpot. Play online or on the app. Lotto from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
How do hockey fans know what day it is? Just turn on the Locked on NHL podcast, where our rotating cast of hockey experts guide you through the week with a different theme show for every day. From big news Monday to recap Friday.
But we've got a couple of news items that are noteworty in the NHL in the last week, one of which is below the NHL, and we'll bring that up first. So the AHL announced officially, this has been speculated for weeks and weeks, but the AHL...
Search Locked on NHL on TuneIn to listen. We're all guilty of spending too much time on social media. Why not add something genuinely useful to your feed with TuneIn? Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. to learn about some of the best stuff happening around the app. You might just discover your next audio obsession.
Casting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good morning from the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin. I'm Matt Miller. And you're Ann Edwards.
Oh, yes, indeed. I'm Anna Edwards, yes. Let's get to a business flash, shall we, Matt?
Yes, a business flash. Okay, let's do that. Sorry. We are looking at equity indexes that have turned higher since the ECB came out and said it was going to provide more funding. Right now, looking at a DAX that's up more than 100 points to 12,195. We're looking at a gain of almost the same size, 0.9% on the IBEX 35 as well. The FTSE, for its part, is the gain the least right now, only up 0.05%, but still up at 61.26. In terms of other risk indicators, we see investors are still holding treasuries, buying treasuries net right now. The yield at 0.6675, but it's come up a little bit. The same is true of bonds. Investors are still buying bonds. The yields come back a little, but right now still at negative 45 basis points, and gilts as well, trading at about 17 basis points. For currencies, you're looking at dollar strength against the yen, 107.16, and dollar strength against the euro at 112.37, though it's a pretty high level for the euro and a pretty low level for the dollar there. In terms of the pound, it has gained strength, the cable rate rising to 124.48. Oil, little change. Well, Brent is little change right now at $40.18 a barrel. NYMEX WTI down about 0.5% at 37.82. There's your Bloomberg Business Flash.
There is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Now for the latest in global world news, let's get to Leanne Gerrans.
France is planning a virus furlough program that could cover a large share of lost incomes for as long as 2 years. The extension comes as the government figures out how to adapt emergency measures put in place to protect businesses and jobs during the pandemic. Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire currently forecasts that France will see an 11% GDP contraction this year. In the US, President Donald Trump has accused Democrats of voting down a police reform bill because they want to cripple law enforcement. That's after they blocked legislation in the Senate that would limit the use of chokeholds and encourage body cams. The Democrats say it doesn't go far enough and has no federal restrictions on the use of lethal force. And human trials of a potential new coronavirus vaccine have started here in the UK today. Volunteers are receiving doses being developed by researchers at Imperial College London. About 300 volunteers are taking part in the study, which is the second vaccine trial on humans underway in this country. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
Leanne, thanks very much for that. Now let's get over to Nathan Hager, who's preparing for Daybreak Americas. Nathan, what do you got coming up?
Well, Matt, we're watching mixed action in global markets this morning. Futures on Wall Street are fluctuating while we're seeing European stocks rise on the promise of more fiscal support. In the U.S., though, of course, rising coronavirus cases have investors' attention for sure. We're going to have team coverage of the price action and bring you thoughts from Goldman Sachs CEO David Solomon and Bob Prince of Bridgewater Associates. They're among the latest speakers at the Bloomberg Invest Global Conference. All this as we await the latest round of weekly jobless claims in the U.S. The labor market, of course, hammered by the pandemic. And the Fed's annual bank stress tests are coming up later today. We'll preview those with Bloomberg Intelligence senior bank analyst Allison Williams. And Bloomberg Business Week's Jason Kelly is with us this morning on a king-sized cover story. And that's just about all I can say about it at the moment. So you won't want to miss that with me here in Moscow. Sorry?
That's a tease.
It is indeed. That is what we call a radio tease. That is absolutely right. Join me and Karen Moscow for the payoff coming up in just a few minutes here on Bloomberg Daybreak.
My interest is piqued.
Tune in, won't you?
Yeah, I mean, for those who don't know, on this side of the pond, Bloomberg Business Week's covers have, always garnered a lot of attention. The magazine is kind of famous for its covers. So, and of course, Jason Kelly is a crack journalist he has historically covered private equity really closely. I think he's written a couple books on it. But man, do I now want to see what that. I'm gonna see if I can get a sneak peek offline. Thank you very much, Nathan. Coming up
the email
with Karen Moscow. If you're tuned in on Sirius XM, if you're listening on London DAB Digital, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance.
Now, Matt, according to our next guest, investors are underpricing the extent to which the recovery could follow the traditional playbook. That's why he's betting on early cycle beneficiaries like US small caps, EU peripheral stocks. For more, let's bring in Andrew Sheets, Chief Cross-Asset Strategist at Morgan Stanley. Andrew, a very good morning to you. So, this doesn't feel very normal. Nothing about working at home, broadcasting TV and radio from my living room feels very normal. But from an investor perspective then, do you think that we overemphasize the abnormal nature of this contraction? It is very severe, the contraction in the global economy.
Yeah, I do think that is getting overemphasized. I think it's totally understandable why it is. We're facing, a pandemic, the scale of which, we haven't seen in over 100 years. We're facing the largest decontraction we've seen in an extremely large amount of time. We've seen an enormous central bank response that, again, is literally off the charts. But I think that what also needs to be kept in mind is that a lot of the patterns are following what we have seen in prior recessions and coming out of recessions. The conditions that preceded this recession had a lot of very normal late cycle characteristics. The way the markets bottomed in March relative to the lows of economic data in April was a very normal lead lag process. And the type of recovery that our economists are forecasting going forward, while it will take some time, we think will look more normal than abnormal, that we will be back at pre-recession levels of activity in about twice as fast as we saw after the global financial crisis.
One thing that is different, Andrew, Dan Moss points out in an opinion column on Bloomberg, this time every economy around the world is contracting. I mean, Adam Posen was saying it shouldn't have been called the global financial crisis in 2009, but the North Atlantic maybe financial crisis, because you still had a lot of power coming out of Asian economies. I keep coming back to this, but it really hit home when I saw the IMF forecast yesterday for a 5% contraction in global GDP. And you look at that chart that goes all the way back to like 1980, you've never seen a real serious contraction of global growth, or at least not in our lifetimes, no matter how old we are. Doesn't that make this time different?
Well, I do think, that raises a key point. We're seeing an unusually coordinated drop in global activity. But I think the other thing that's remarkable, right, is I think you would have remembered from, conversations about recession risk maybe a year ago, a lot of investors would have told you, look, it can't happen because so much of the economy is now the service sector, and the service sector just doesn't contract like that, like you get in usual recessions. The consumer doesn't pull back like that. And yet, this has been a really unique downturn that's hit the services side of the economy incredibly hard, maybe in some ways harder than the manufacturing side of the economy. So that is certainly, I think, something that is different and unique about this cycle. But I think that the number of factors that are in common around it, the conditions that preceded it, the fact that both fiscal and monetary support are supporting it, and also I think that the fact that the markets are responding more to the rate of change than the level of growth, I think those are actually all very kind of traditional patterns.
And let me ask you about credit markets then, Andrew, because looking at some of your recent research, you're quite positive on credit, in particular in the US. We had a conversation earlier on today about how there's just no price discovery in credit markets. Or is that wrong? Is there price discovery? It's just the price is supported by central banks globally, in particular in the United States. How worrying is that lack of price discovery in credit markets for you?
I actually think that the market is still relatively discerning in the sense that you have quite a bit of price dispersion within credit markets. That you have a lot of the market has performed quite well and has rallied strongly, but you still have a pretty significant tail in both investment grade and high yield markets that's trading at a much lower price. And I think that matters. I think that suggests that investors are still very aware of the risks, aware that default rates will be high, aware that central bank policy can't fix everything. And so I think in some ways, the central bank intervention is doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's making sure that credit is there for good, sound, well-structured balance sheets. And it's not simply providing credit to every single bond, because if it was, then you would see a very different distribution of prices within the credit market. So I think there is still some price discovery there, and I think that's, again, a somewhat good sign.
Andrew, thanks so much for joining us. Andrew Sheets there, Chief Cross Asset Strategist at Morgan Stanley. He'll be joining Surveillance next, so if you want to see more from him, switch over to TV, or if you're listening on London DAB, you'll be cool. If you're listening on Sirius XM, you'll hear Daybreak. This is Bloomberg.
Different adapts, different overcomes, different keeps moving, different keeps thinking, different stays connected, different never stops dreaming. The University of Northampton invites you to a virtual open day for a taste of all the benefits of studying with us from this September. Search University of Northampton Virtual Open Days. It's the future, but different.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We can replace your battery at over 700 stores and garages, or even at your home or work with our mobile experts, so you can enjoy an engine that starts first time, every time, and start enjoying the open road again.
Are we nearly there yet?
From battery replacements to tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are
ploughing on, boxing up goods and rolling them out, shipping kettles,
instruments to kids,
art for walls,
treats to pets, shorts for sunny weekends,
to brighten up one British home at a time.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
The Mini Electric was raring to go until ready, set, stop. We hit the power down switch. We waited. But now it's time to start up again. We're ready with the Mini Electric and whole Mini range online. Showroom safety measures are set, and we're feeling good to go. Find your perfect Mini at mini.co.uk.
Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Thursday, June 25th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
U.S. futures drop again on coronavirus concerns.
Wall Street awaits the latest reading on jobless claims and economic growth.
And we'll bring you our exclusive interview with LeBron James.
I will continue to point out things that I know is wrong if I see it, and I'll also continue to lead by example as a model citizen, as a black man growing up in America.
New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut want visitors from hotspots to quarantine. Parts of upstate New York are ready to move to phase 4 of reopening. I'm Amy Morris. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. 2 pro golfers and 2 caddies have now tested positive for coronavirus, and it's official. The New York City Marathon has been canceled.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Karen Moscow.
I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak is brought to you by SEI. Today's competitive marketplace requires asset managers to become more operationally adept. See how you can transform your business with SEI's global platform at SEIC.com/IMS.
And U.S. futures are lower, 501 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures down 8 points, Dow futures down 75, NASDAQ futures down 2. The DAX in Germany's up 0.8%, CAC in Paris up 0.2%, and the FTSE 100 down less than 0.1%. 10-year Treasury up 4/30 seconds, yield 0.66%. The yield on the 2-year 0.18%. And NYMEX crude oil is down 0.7%. Nathan.
Karen, let's get more on the stock action overseas. We begin our global team coverage this morning with Bloomberg's Ewan Potts in London. Good morning, Ewan.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. A turnaround for European stocks this morning. Following that negative session in the US, the Stoxx 600 was earlier down as much as 1.3%, but shares now trading in the green. Bank stocks turning positive after the ECB set up a new liquidity facility for central banks of countries outside the euro area. 15 out of 19 sectors now higher, with automakers and utilities near the top of the table. Tech stocks and travel and leisure shares selling off today. Europe's Stoxx 600 up 0.2%. Live in London, I'm Ewan Potts, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Ewan, thank you. Stocks fell in Asia. Bloomberg's Juliet Sally continues our global team coverage with the recap from Singapore. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Karen and Nathan. Japan's Nikkei 225 index closed down by more than 1% in Tokyo, while Australia's ASX 200 fell 2.5% following the country's biggest spike in infections since April, and as the nation's carrier Qantas announced job cuts, a capital raising, and indicated international travel may only resume in July next year. In Seoul, the Kospi fell 2.3%. In Singapore, Juliet Sally, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Juliet, thanks. The drop in stocks comes as coronavirus cases surge in parts of the U.S. Let's get the very latest from Bloomberg's John Tucker.
In California, Florida, and Texas, Nathan, each set records for new cases yesterday, and Arizona hit a peak in hospitalizations. The new numbers reflect the virus's spread in some states that were slow to enforce lockdowns or too quick to lift them. Disney has indefinitely delayed the reopening of its theme park in California. North Carolina put its reopening on hold for 3 weeks. The U.S. recorded more than 34,500 new infections for a second day, nearing the peak set in April. Meanwhile, a new model predicts the U.S. death toll will hit 180,000 by October. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. Even with Wednesday's 2.6% sell-off, the S&P 500 is still up more than 36% from its March lows. Goldman Sachs Chief Executive Officer David Solomon, speaking at the Bloomberg Global Invest Conference, says the recent rally can't be justified by corporations' profit potential.
The equity market does seem to be a little bit ahead of my view of the future earnings performance of businesses as we look 6 to 12 months out. And if that's true and I'm right about that, you'll see a rebalancing of that over time.
We also caught up with Bridgewater Associates' Bob Prince. The co-chief investment officer of the world's biggest hedge fund says the impact of the coronavirus pandemic could be long-lasting.
The problem then is that we're talking about the virus, which has a time frame of probably 18 to 24 months. And so I refer to that as a duration mismatch. Essentially, the time frame of the virus impact on spending and income in relation to the time frame of how long people can last.
And Prince also said that Ray Dalio, Bridgewater's billionaire founder, still believes that cash is trash, meaning that people should stay invested in markets.
We'll get more evidence on how the pandemic has affected the U.S. economy. Economists are forecasting workers filed another 1.3 million in jobless claims last week. Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice reports.
States have processed almost 50 million claims since mid-March, the result of COVID-19 shutdowns, cost-cutting, and business failures. Bloomberg Economics says jobless claims could start to ebb after emergency aid of $600 a week winds down. Our economists note a recent congressional study suggests extending payments beyond next month would leave many workers better off staying home, curbing incentives to seek another job. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Vinny, thank you. That report due out at 8:30 a.m. Wall Street time, as well as the latest reading on U.S. economic growth. Economists are forecasting GDP contracted at a 5% pace. That would be the steepest drop in more than a decade.
The Federal Reserve releases the results of its annual stress tests on the largest U.S. banks today. That story from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
The tests measure the bank's ability to weather a financial crisis, and for the first time, they'll include a sensitivity analysis to gauge how well banks can navigate an economy shattered by the coronavirus. The findings could feed a growing clamor for the biggest banks to suspend or cut dividend payments after they temporarily quit share buybacks for this quarter. The stress test began in 2009 as a tool to help avoid another financial crisis. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Charlie, thank you. LeBron James is speaking exclusively with Bloomberg. The NBA star and his business partner Maverick Carter sat down for a wide-ranging interview with Bloomberg's Jason Kelly. It's part of this week's cover story for Bloomberg Business Week, where James and Carter discuss their joint business ventures, the pandemic, and the need for change after the killing of George Floyd and the protests spurred by his death.
There's been a lot that's gone on in 2020. We're still trying to make the most of it and continue to be powerful and continue to be heard, and using this opportunity for the better of change.
And we will bring you more of our conversation with LeBron James in a few minutes. Futures this morning, S&P futures lower, down 3.5 points. Dow futures down 30. NASDAQ futures higher, up 11.5. And the euro 1.1230 against the dollar. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It's 5:07 on Wall Street. Let's bring in Amy Morris for more of what's going on around the world. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning, Nathan. Now, we've been telling you about that spike in coronavirus cases in different states in the southern and western parts of the United States. Now there's a travel advisory for any visitors from hotspots to New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo.
We're announcing today a joint travel advisory. People coming in from states that have a high infection rate must quarantine for 14 days.
Cuomo says they have to make sure those rates continue to drop, and that's what keeps him up at night. President Trump will be visiting New Jersey after hosting a rally in one of those hotspots, but won't be following the quarantine mandate. NewJersey.com reports a spokesman for the president says he's not a civilian, doesn't have to follow that quarantine order. The White House says the president is regularly tested, as is anyone who comes close to him, including staff, guests, and press. 5 upstate New York regions are on track to re-enter Phase 4 of reopening tomorrow, including Finger Lakes, Central New York, Mohawk Valley, Southern Tier, and North Country. New York Governor Cuomo says the state's hospitalization numbers continue to dip.
The number of hospitalizations is 1,071. That's the lowest level of hospitalizations we have seen since this nightmare began.
Phase 4 allows low-risk outdoor arts and entertainment, zoos, botanical gardens, and some indoor venues like museums and aquariums at lower capacity. Professional sports without fans and higher education and film production can also resume. Congress remains in a standoff over police reform in the U.S. While the president accuses Democrats of trying to weaken the police, Democrats say the Senate's Republican bill didn't go far enough. Republican Senator Tim Scott and Democratic Senator Doug Jones each accusing the other of playing politics.
They cannot allow this party to be seen as a party that reaches out to all communities.
This was just a way for Senator McConnell to blame Democrats for blocking things.
The House votes on the Democrats' proposal today. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Amy, thank you. It is 5:09 on Wall Street. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Here's John Stashauer.
All right, Nathan, golf has been back for a few weeks now. The first tournament went smoothly, not a single positive test for COVID. Last week there was one, Nick Watney. The tour is now in Cromwell, Connecticut. The Travelers tees off today. Another player, Cameron Champ, tested positive, and so have the caddies of both Brooks Koepka and Graham McDowell. So all 3 players have withdrawn, and PGA Commissioner Jay Monahan admits they've become too lax. He worries about caddies exchanging clubs with players. And what is hardly a surprise, the New York City Marathon, November 1st, canceled. 50,000 runners, upwards of 2 million spectators. Not a good recipe in these times. It was to be the 50th anniversary of the first New York City Marathon. The only other time it was canceled was 2012 due to Hurricane Sandy. We'll find out soon what the Met and Yankees schedules will look like for this shortened 2020 season. 60 games in 66 days, 40 games within the division, and 20 versus the other league's Eastern Division, so no games with long travel involved. 2 NBA players have tested positive, Jabari Parker of Sacramento and Indiana's Malcolm Brogdon. Avery Bradley will not be part of the NBA restart. His 6-year-old son has a respiratory problem, and he would not be able to travel to Orlando, and Bradley did not want to leave him for what could be a few months. He could have been part of a championship team with the Lakers, who might replace Bradley with J.R. Smith, the ex-Knick who played with LeBron James in Cleveland. Jerome McGinley, a 50-goal scorer with Calgary, just the second African-American NHL player to be named for induction to the Hockey Hall of Fame. John Stashauer, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan.
All right, John, thank you. And you may not be able to go to baseball games, but Mr. Met, Philly Fanatic, and Wally the Green Monster will. Mascots are getting a reprieve from MLB when it returns to action next month. The mascots are in play, just not on the field. And stay with us in just a few minutes. We will have more from our exclusive interview with LeBron James as he begins a new media venture with a $100 million investment. Futures fluctuating this morning. S&P futures down 6 points. Dow futures down 52. And NASDAQ futures are up 9 points right now. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President, Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like when your week off is forecast warm and sunny. Or when there's an extra unclaimed sausage left on the barbecue. Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that feeling. Nice, isn't it? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We fit car tyres for over 500,000 customers every year. We could fit yours at one of over 350 garages, or even on your driveway with our mobile experts, which means you can safely hit the road again. And surprise that special someone. Happy birthday! From tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
Listen, that's a dream. Everyone has them, jingling away in the back of our minds. And most of the time, that's where dreams stay. So easy to ignore. Anything can drown them out, and everything does. But at Honda, we listen to our dreams. We get right up close. And on really good days, they become reality. From 2022, Honda's mainstream cars will only be hybrid or electric. Honda, the power of dreams.
Conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Emily Chang.
Leaders across Silicon Valley are among the biggest critics against President Trump's decision to temporarily halt guest worker visas to the United States, which are widely used across Silicon Valley. One executive familiar with the immigrant experience and its contributions to the tech industry is Ilya Fushman, partner and managing member at Kleiner Perkins and a former executive at Dropbox. What's your take on the social and economic impact of this, not knowing how long these visas will be suspended?
It's important, it's personal, not just for me, but for our firm. And I think it has tremendous impact on our industry and really the economy as a whole. I immigrated to the U.S. in the 90s on a J-1 visa. I became a citizen in 2003. Mamoon Hamid and Wanshay, my partners, came out on H-1B visas. More interestingly, about 50% of our portfolio company founders are immigrants. And in our most recent few funds, that number is somewhere between 60 and 70%. These are obviously household names like Google and Slack, but are also some amazing new coming companies like Nova Credit, Plastic, Netlify. These are companies that are helping immigrants, that are helping small businesses, that are building the next generation of enterprise software companies. And overall, there are about 3 million immigrant entrepreneurs in the U.S.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. S&P futures lower this morning, down 4.5 points. Dow futures down 40. NASDAQ futures up 12. The DAX in Germany's up 0.9%. 10-year Treasury up 4/30 seconds, yield 0.66%, and the yield on the 2-year 0.18%. NYMEX crude oil is down about 0.6% at $37.80 a barrel. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Amy Morris with more on what's going on around the world. Amy.
Karen, the coronavirus wave continues across parts of the U.S. Arizona hitting a peak in hospitalizations. California, Texas, and Florida each set records for new cases yesterday. As coronavirus cases do spike across the country, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut put a travel ban in place requiring visitors from hotspots to quarantine for 14 days. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Amy, thank you. It's 5:18 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager. LeBron James is speaking exclusively with Bloomberg. The basketball star and his business partner, Maverick Carter, sat down for a wide-ranging interview with Bloomberg's Jason Kelly. It's part of this week's cover story for Bloomberg Business Week, where James and Carter discuss their joint business ventures, the pandemic, and the need for change following the killing of George Floyd and the protests spurred by his death. Let's listen to part of that conversation now.
LeBron, it strikes me that this moment has come to you in many ways, but it's a moment that it feels like you were anticipating to some extent. How does it feel to face this right now?
Jason, I don't want to say that I was anticipating it. I just want to say that we've always been in this position. We've always strived. We've always had to plan for this moment. It's something that I've always had a passion about, and that's, letting people know and having people to understand how important we are as Black America, and the powers and the creativity and the language and everything and the struggle that we've had for so long. And for me to have the brands that I have and having Spring Hill and having Uninterrupted, and now today having a nonprofit organization, and we are more than a vote. It's allowing people to now really sense what we've been striving to do from the very beginning. So it's come, you always talk about timing, and I guess the timing is perfect for what we've always wanted people to understand what we're all about as a company and as a brand and as individuals.
LeBron, I have to ask you, what has it felt like to you these last 3 months? I mean, first of all, the season stopping abruptly, within a week or two of when we last saw each other. When we left off, we were talking about the playoffs. We'll talk a little basketball later. But the pandemic and then the killing of George Floyd, just walk me through how that's felt. It must have been tremendously traumatic. And I just wonder how you felt through all of this.
For our team and for our city of Los Angeles, we've been through a lot, this year. You look at the death of Kobe Bryant that we had to deal with. And obviously, our prayers are still with Vanessa and the two daughters that's here. But we've dealt with that as an organization and as a city of Los Angeles. So, that was a tragic moment for us. You come to the point where the playoffs are almost around the corner, and then, it stopped because of a world pandemic and COVID-19. So, we just all had to be at bay and just kind of wait around and see what was going on and see what was happening, but understanding that the health of, of every individual is so much more important at that point in time than worrying about, chasing a ring or chasing a championship because there were lives at risk and no one had an answer to it. And then bring us up to speed to the George Floyd killing and just seeing that video and seeing, how many people were hurt, not only in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, but all over the world, and especially in the Black community, because we've seen this over and over and over, about police brutality and the things that goes on in the inner city when being, racially profiled as an African American Black man or as a Black woman and things that's going on. So, it's been a lot that's going on in 2020, and we're still trying to make the most of it and continue to be powerful and continue to be heard, and using this opportunity for the better of change at the end of the day.
That's LeBron James speaking with Jason Kelly. And now let's bring in Jason for more on his interview with the Lakers great, co-host of Bloomberg Business Week with us this morning. Such a timely interview, Jason. But, things like this, interviews like this, don't just come about in a flash of a pan. I mean, you've been working on this for months. It tells you something about how the issue of race in this country just doesn't go away.
Well, you're exactly right, Nathan. It's great to hear your voice. I'm so happy to be with you this morning.
Yeah.
This is fascinating in part because this is a story I actually started last October. I went to the first game of the season, and I started spending time with LeBron and Maverick from then on. I sat down for a big interview in February to talk about this company, and that's what's so fascinating about this is they have come to this moment very, very well prepared. I mean, they were all set up in many ways to face what we're all talking about now, making shows and, doing the sorts of things and having the sorts of conversations that we all need to be having right now.
Yeah, and how do they hope to leverage this new company, the Spring Hill Company, to try to bring about that change?
Well, for them, it's a lot about representation. It's a lot about, showing people on screen. It's really about, showing people a different sort of content in many ways. So you look at what they've done on Netflix. They have a web series called Kneading Dough. It's about showing people, things that they don't necessarily see. And also, I think importantly, Nathan, allowing creators who haven't always gotten the opportunity to create a platform.
And we're going to have much more on this interview with LeBron James throughout the morning, throughout the day here on Bloomberg Radio. Jason Kelly, co-host of Bloomberg Business Week. Thanks again for being with us this morning. And you can catch the full interview with LeBron James in its entirety later on today on Bloomberg Business Week at 5 p.m. Wall Street time. You can hear that conversation on Bloomberg Radio and on YouTube by searching Bloomberg Global News. Futures are fluctuating ahead of the open on this Thursday morning. S&P futures are down 3 points. Dow futures down 36. NASDAQ futures are higher by 13 points. Stay with us. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Futures kind of quiet this morning after stocks tumbled yesterday over worries about the rise in coronavirus infections in some parts of the country. The Dow slid 710 points. The S&P 500 fell 81. The NASDAQ slid 222 points. The latest jobless claims report is out before the opening bell today. It's expected to show another 1.3 million Americans looking for first-time unemployment benefits. It's a large number, but would represent a continuation of a downward trend. Disney has indefinitely delayed the reopening of its theme parks in Anaheim, California, because it did not think it could get approvals from the state and reach agreements with its unions in time. The parks were supposed to open July 17th. The union said Disney has not responded to all of its questions regarding the coronavirus. The company still plans to start opening its Florida theme parks on July 11th, despite a surge in cases in that state. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
What's the true value of your custodial relationship? Ben Harrison of BNY Mellon's Pershing explains.
As sophisticated investors demand more from their advisors, advisory firms, in turn, need to rely on their custodian to help them grow their complex businesses. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, supporting the rapid growth of RIAs is our number one priority. We understand what it means to deliver true value to our clients who are looking for a custodian that is aligned with their best interest and delivers high-value solutions, all in an open architecture environment with flexibility, choice, and transparency. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength, resiliency, and high-touch service that BNY Mellon Pershing provides. When you work with Pershing, we put your business first. Can your custodian say that?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Pershing Advisor Solutions, LLC. Member FINRA SIPC.
Have you wanted to speak a new language?
For the friendships, for the fresh air, for the space to grow, for the knowledge, for the sport, for the outdoor education, for the wide horizons, for the academic excellence, for the future. Unleash your child's education at West Buckland School, a co-educational day and boarding school in beautiful North Devon. If you're moving to the southwest for a better quality of life, this is education without compromise, in what the Good Schools Guide called a gem of a school in an exceptional location. To see for yourself, find us at westbuckland.com.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We can replace your battery at over 700 stores and garages, or even at your home or work with our mobile experts, so you can enjoy an engine that starts first time, every time, and start enjoying the open road again.
Are we nearly there yet?
From battery replacements to tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
At Honda, we believe in our ears. Listening can help solve some of life's biggest conundrums. For example, if a car breaks down and there's no one around to hear it, does it make a sound? The answer is yes. The new Jazz Hybrid will pinpoint your location automatically and send for help at the tap of a button. And with its personal assistant, you can find the answers to other conundrums like, where is a good vegan gluten-free pizza place with free parking? The new Honda Jazz. Hybrid and connected. Honda, the power of dreams. Connectivity subscription available in selected grades.
In line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
I was offered one.
I was offered one. Were you?
Yeah, I was offered one too.
1 2 1 2. I was offered one.
I was offered one.
Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online, or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We're just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. U.S. futures are little change to higher this morning following yesterday's 2.6% decline for the S&P 500. The drop comes on renewed concerns over the coronavirus. And we get the latest live from Bloomberg's John Tucker.
And Karen, Florida and Texas each hit records for cases Wednesday, with health officials in Houston saying their infrastructure was overwhelmed. Arizona reached a peak in hospitalizations hospitalizations. In California, which also saw an all-time high for new infections, Walt Disney delayed the reopening of its theme parks indefinitely, while Nevada's governor ordered everyone to wear masks in public. The U.S. recorded more than 34,500 new infections for a second day. New York, New Jersey, Connecticut set quarantines for incoming travelers from hot zones, and North Carolina put its reopening on hold. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. Stocks in Europe were lower most of the morning, but turned higher after the European Central Bank said it would set up a new facility to provide precautionary euro repo lines to central banks outside the euro area.
In 3 hours from now, we'll get another indication on how the coronavirus has impacted the U.S. economy. GDP is estimated to have contracted at a 5% pace. As Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice reports, that would be the steepest drop in more than a decade.
Today's GDP data will be bleak, but the second quarter's plunge could be 9 times worse, reflecting the deadliest day so far of COVID-19. Projections from the Atlanta Fed suggest the economy contracted by a record 45% in April, May, and June. Third quarter GDP could retrace some of the historic losses as the economic deep freeze starts to melt away. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Vinny, thank you. And economists are also forecasting workers filed another 1.3 million jobless claims last week.
Nike reports fiscal fourth quarter results today after the close. Bloomberg's Larry Kofsky has a preview.
Nike's results will be marred by the spread of COVID-19 outside Asia. Analysts are forecasting a 24% sales decline and a profit of about 10 cents a share, but estimates vary widely. Bloomberg Intelligence says the consensus sales estimate may be too conservative, given store closings in North America, Europe, and Asia. That excludes China, where robust sales gains will provide a partial offset. Inventories remain a concern amid a slowdown in wholesale orders and with store inventory stagnating. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Larry, thank you. S&P futures are up a point. Dow futures up 5. NASDAQ futures up 29. And the euro 1.1232 against the dollar. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
Thanks, Karen. It's 5:33 on Wall Street. Amy Morris has more on what's going on around the world. Amy?
Thanks, Nathan. As coronavirus cases surge in states across the country, the numbers are going down in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, and leaders there want to keep it that way. They've put in place a travel advisory for any visitor from a known hotspot to quarantine for 14 days. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy.
We have taken our people, the three of us, these 3 states, through hell and back. And the last thing we need to do right now is to subject our folks to another round.
The list of states impacted by the travel advisory will be updated each day. As the numbers in New York go down, more places are reopening. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says they keep an eye on the data.
All the regions are constant since the reopening, including New York City, which we're watching very carefully. But we watch it on a day-to-day basis, and right now all the numbers look good.
So 5 upstate regions are on track to enter Phase 4 tomorrow. Finger Lakes, Central New York, Mohawk Valley, Southern Tier, and North Country. Phase 4 allows for zoos, botanical gardens, aquariums, and museums to open at lower capacities, and for film and movie production to resume, as well as higher education and professional sports without fans. But not malls, movie theaters, or gyms. Those businesses had been hoping to be included in Phase 4 after being shut down for 3 months. That decision leaves business owners uncertain of when they can welcome back customers. The New York City Marathon is canceled. Scheduled for November 1st, officials say the logistics of the world's largest marathon just pose too much of a health and safety concern for everyone involved. Senate Democrats have voted down a Republican effort to open debate on a GOP police reform bill. Democratic Senator Doug Jones and Republican Senator Tim Scott, who led efforts on the legislation, each say the other side is more worried about the November election than they are about true reform.
He knew that this vote was going to fail. He wanted us to make a political point. That's what Senator McConnell often does, especially as you're moving into an election season.
Instead of going forward and getting what you want now, they've decided to punt this ball until the election.
The House votes on the Democrats' measure today. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Amy, thank you. 5:35 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Here's John Stashak.
All
All right, Nathan, sports already clearly coming back. In August, we'll have baseball and both NBA and NHL playoffs going on. But it's not as if the virus is going away, and the sports world right now has its share of positive tests. 2 more NBA players, Sacramento's Jabari Parker and Indiana's Malcolm Brogdon, the day after we learned of Denver All-Star Nikola Jokic. The Phillies have 7 players with COVID. The Rockies have 3, including All-Star outfielder Charlie Blackmon. The Red Sox, Tigers, and Mariners all have at least 1. The plan is to test MLB players every other day. And 4 golfers won't play the tournament that begins today in Connecticut. 2 have tested positive, Nick Watney last week, and since then Cameron Champ. And 2 others, Brooks Koepka and Graham McDowell, have withdrawn because their caddies have it. PGA Commissioner Jay Monahan admits they must be vigilant.
If we can properly socially distance, if everybody is when they're inside, is wearing a mask and doing all the things that we've outlined from the outset, we continue to stay true to what we've set, we feel like, we're going to be in a position to sustain our return.
The Knicks have hired William Wesley to their front office, known in NBA circles as Worldwide Wes. He worked previously with Leon Rose when he was an agent. He's now the Knicks president. Wesley said to be well connected with NBA players, coaches, and agents. Rose, in a rare interview, says he hopes to name a new coach within the next month. When baseball does return, National League games will use the DH for the first time ever, and extra inning games will begin with a runner at second base. They want to try and avoid long extra inning games. John Stashauer, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan.
All right, John, thank you. It's 5:37 on Wall Street. Time for the Tri-State Business Report with Bloomberg's Ed Corey.
Well, New York Mayor Bill de Blasio says the city's considering 22,000 layoffs and furloughs among its 326,000 employees to cut $1 billion in expenses after lockdown-related losses. De Blasio's projected a $9 billion loss in tax revenue over the next 2 years because of the pandemic. The Metropolitan Transportation Authority may consider cutting its workforce, reducing service, and deficit borrowing. That's if the federal government fails to allocate billions more in aid. The transit agency faces a potential $10.3 billion deficit through 2021. MTA ridership has dropped dramatically during the coronavirus. While New York City slowly reopens, uncertainty reigns for families that decamped to suburban spreads with lawns and extra space for Zoom schoolrooms and offices. Now they have to weigh whether to return to their apartments before the next academic year starts in September or make the move out permanent. That's your Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey.
Thanks, Ed. It's 5:38 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio is on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Jeff Bellinger, and on WIOD in Miami, I'm reporting the economic recovery appears to be weakening in Florida and other states with new coronavirus outbreaks.
I'm Steve Podoskan on KNX in Los Angeles. We're talking about Disneyland indefinitely delaying its reopening.
I'm Roger Hearing on Bloomberg DAB Digital Radio in London. We're reporting on the pressure on one of Boris Johnson's key ministers over allegations of preferential treatment to a Conservative donor in a property deal.
I'm Gina Cervetti, and for WBBM in Chicago, I'm reporting that Fed Bank of Chicago President Charles Evans says recurring coronavirus outbreaks could mean restrained economic expansion and higher unemployment for years.
I'm Ed Corey on WWJ in Detroit. I'm reporting General Motors will eliminate a shift at an SUV plant in Spring Hill, Tennessee.
Those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning. Apple says it's closing 7 stores in Houston because of a recent COVID-19 spike. That story from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
The iPhone maker says it is taking the action out of, quote, an abundance of caution. Last week, the company closed 11 stores across Florida, Arizona, North Carolina, and South Carolina that had been reopened earlier. Despite the renewed closures, Apple has reopened the majority of its 271 U.S. stores. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Charlie, thanks. Wirecard has filed for insolvency following the arrest of its CEO amid a massive accounting scandal that left the German payment processor scrambling to find another $2 billion missing from its balance sheet. The stock is down another 76% this morning. The latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is online now. The cover, the king and the CEO, LeBron James and longtime business partner Maverick Carter, expanding their media empire at perhaps just the right moment. Terminal customers can receive a complimentary subscription at MAG Go. Listen to Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly right here on Bloomberg Radio. Watch it on YouTube weekdays from 2 to 6 p.m. Wall Street time. Get global business, finance, and tech news on your TV, computer, or mobile device at youtube.com. Search Bloomberg Global News. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/seize change.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Thursday morning by the scruff of the neck. Take this sunshine as an omen and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
What if the world listened more? Maybe it could become a better place. Because when we really listen, we're smart to notice things that don't sound quite right. They might not seem obvious at first, but listen closely and they stand out like a sore plum. And the more we listen, the more we learn. Our ears help us find belter solutions. And things can change from this to something a little more like this. The new Honda Jazz is a hybrid. Honda, the power of dreams.
When you're buying tech online and you want to make sure you get exactly what you need, would you rather talk to a robot or to someone called Robert or Ethan or Kai or Rachel or one of our other tech experts on Shop Live, Curry's PC World's online video call experience?
Hi, I'm Ali. How can I help?
Isn't it nice to get expert advice from another human being before you buy? They're just a click away. Curry's PC World. Talk to our tech experts online with Shop Live.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. save lives.
Get your cook on with Asda. With rollbacks on Hellman's Real Mayonnaise, 705 grams was £2.75, now £2. And a 6-pack of Warburton Sandwich Thins was £1, now 75p. Wham bam, add your lunchtime ham. Find thousands of rollbacks across our stores. Asda. Selected stores and lines subject to availability. Offers end 1st of July.
TikTok on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Coronavirus cases are increasing across the U.S.
26 states now seeing surges in coronavirus infections. Of those states, Texas reporting over 5,000 new cases and a rise in hospitalizations. In Florida, cases surging for young people ages 18 to 35. Miami-Dade County is the epicenter of the cases in Florida. The governor says he won't mandate masks to be worn statewide. But in Palm Beach County, commissioners voted in favor to mandate masks. Some residents not happy, calling it a violation of their constitutional rights. This as the push for a vaccine continues. I'm Daryl Forges reporting.
London-listed shares drop as lender Non-Standard Finance warns of ongoing risks. The company tumbled 34% to a record low after saying the coronavirus crisis had halted lending at the British company. On Wall Street, Dow futures are lower. I'm John Trout.
It's a new disease making an unprecedented impact.
The job losses were widespread.
It is a stunningly historic moment.
Your best strategy?
Is this a market that's accepted reality?
Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures are slipping this morning while European stocks advance as investors study whether a resurgence in coronavirus infections will sap appetite for riskier assets. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are down about 9 points. Dow futures down 92. NASDAQ futures down 3. The DAX in Germany is up 0.4%. 10-year Treasury up 4/32, yield 0.66%. The yield on the 2-year 0.18%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.6% or 23 cents at $37.79 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.2% or $3.60 at $17.71.50 an ounce. The euro 1.1226 against the dollar. British pound 1.2432, and the yen is at 107.23. Wirecard filed for insolvency proceedings today after a massive accounting scandal brought the payments company to its knees. Wirecard management cited over-indebtedness as the reason behind the decision to seek court protection in Munich. Shares are down about 65% in Frankfurt right now. And today we are watching for the weekly report on U.S. initial jobless claims at 8:30 Wall Street time, along with durable goods orders and another look at first quarter GDP. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Amy Morris with more on what's going on around the world. Amy.
Karen, the COVID-19 pandemic, which set records for infections and hospitalizations across the U.S. on Wednesday, is now predicted to kill 180,000 Americans by October. New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut have put a travel advisory in place to quarantine visitors from hotspots to their states for 14 days. And the Pentagon has released a list of 20 companies it says are owned or controlled by China's military, including Huawei Technologies. They say it is to help federal agencies and academic institutions know who they're doing business with. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg.
The Federal Reserve today releases a report on the strength of banks' balance sheets, the annual stress tests. They're supposed to give us an idea of how banks would perform under a variety of economic scenarios. Joining us now with a closer look, Bloomberg banking analyst Allison Williams. Well, Allison, I have a scenario for you. A global slowdown from a pandemic. Is this year's stress test any more stringent? Does it take into account this pandemic?
Well, I think there are two layers, and so sort of the official test is going to be run with the scenarios that were given out before the pandemic really took hold. But, of course, the more interesting analysis will be how the banks perform under a scenario that's more like the current environment. But it's important to note that for the individual banks, what we'll get is the analysis under the prior formed scenarios. These are going to be very important because they're going to inform us as to upcoming capital requirements related to the stressed capital buffer, so that's a change in prior tests. We won't necessarily get those today, but we will get some indication of what those might look like. The second layer is something that was added post-COVID, and that is that the Fed is going to look at the banks across sort of a few different scenarios. So again, that's a little bit different than what's normally run, but we're not going to get necessarily the same detail from that analysis. I think the Fed is really looking at that to look at, sort of aggregate across the banks. We will get the aggregate results, but we won't get necessarily the same bank-by-bank detail. What we will get, I think, is a better sense of where the regulators stand on the dividend question. And so there's been a lot of former regulators that have made the call for banks to cut dividends. The current regulator has said they don't think that's necessary at this point. Quarles gave a speech on last Friday.
This is Randy Quarles of the Federal Reserve System.
Correct. And so he sort of signaled, based on his comments, the takeaway was that banks are likely not going to have this blanket dividend cut that some people are worried about. Of course, people are going to continue to look individually at the separate banks to see what their policy is going to be coming out of it.
Okay, so if the tests do reveal adequate capital buffers for the banks, I guess the feeling is they can go ahead with dividends, maybe share buybacks. But my question for you is, what are the optics of a bank raising dividends, doing buybacks during this pandemic?
Sure, and that's a great question. So first of all, on the buybacks, the banks have all paused the buybacks, at least the big banks that I cover here in the U.S. Things are different around the world, but and that seems reasonable. But keep in mind that buybacks are about 70% of the overall payout, and so that's really, I think, the bigger lever in terms of preserving capital. But the question is, even if banks have excess capital, should they continue to pay dividends? And the one really to watch here is Wells Fargo. And it's an interesting case because, to your point, they have significant excess capital. So in general, when we get the results later today and we look at their stress capital buffer, that's not necessarily what the bank is looking at. The CFO basically came out in mid-June and talked about the fact that they're looking at their dividend more as a ratio to their pre-credit incomes. That's basically what their income is before losses. Losses are the big variable, obviously, in this unprecedented downturn, or we expect it to be. And if the bank is going to look at it that way and not look at their stress capital buffer and the excess capital, that tells sort of a very different story. Wells Fargo is a little bit of a unique bank in this respect.
We can safely say they're under the microscope.
Correct.
Allison, thanks very much. Bloomberg banking analyst Allison Williams. Again, we get results, at least in the aggregate today, of the Federal Reserve annual bank stress tests. And thanks very much. I'm John Tucker. Karen, back to you.
All right, John, thank you. It is 5:54 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg Law Report. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning. From Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
The American Civil Liberties Union charges that facial recognition led to the improper arrest of a black man in Detroit. The Financial Times filed a lawsuit in Illinois federal court accusing FinTank, a Chicago fintech community, of infringing on the FT trademark. An appeals court in California ruled that Union Carbide must face claims in a suit that arose from the death of a man who allegedly inhaled dust that contained asbestos.
Bloomberg Law. Everything you need, all on one legal research platform, including guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
And now other legal news we're watching this morning. A federal appeals court ordered a judge to immediately dismiss the criminal case against President Donald Trump's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, who twice pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI. For more on the decision, Bloomberg's June Grasso speaks to National Security Attorney Bradley Mars of Mark Zaid.
This was a surprise to many because you had Flynn requesting an extraordinary remedy, and during oral arguments, the judges appeared skeptical of granting that.
Yeah, well, this is the reminder that so many of us always say when people start live tweeting oral arguments and start making conclusions about how judges will rule based on them. Never, ever read too much into oral arguments, because you never know whether or not the judges are simply road testing some ideas for themselves, or just putting you through the motions, or if they actually are in agreement with the particular line of question they're bringing against you. And this was very much that case. You listen to oral arguments, you would have thought it was going to be 3-zip denying the writ of mandamus, but instead it was 2-1 in favor of granting it, which certainly caught some people by surprise. This was a somewhat controversial ruling, to say the least. There's certainly, some weakness in the citations provided by the majority opinion to back up some of their arguments. There's a point where they're literally just pointing to a legal treatise and no case law as justification.
So Judge Sullivan has the right to appeal this to the full circuit?
So either Judge Sullivan could seek review by the full circuit, or one of the judges on the circuit, him or herself, could do it on their own. They have that authority to seek a vote by the full D.C. circuit on whether or not to rehear the case before the entire circuit. There would have to be at least 6 judges who would ultimately vote in favor of rehearing it for that to occur. So it's likely, although not guaranteed, that this will go before the full D.C. circuit. And there's no guarantees on how the full circuit might do. It's entirely possible the full circuit might agree with this opinion by Judge Rouse. I'm not going to claim that I'm that clairvoyant and that ability to see the future to determine it, but I would certainly put my money against her on a rehearing, but anything's possible.
And that's Bradley Moss of Mark Zaid speaking to Bloomberg's June Grasso. Catch more of that interview plus analysis of the latest legal news by listening to the Bloomberg Law Show at 10 p.m. Eastern Time or subscribing to the Bloomberg Law Podcast. And attorneys can find exceptional legal research and business development tools at BloombergLaw.com. And Bloomberg Daybreak is brought to you by SEI. Challenges highlight one's character, partnership, and resilience. At SEI, they act as one community with their clients. Go to SEIC.com/banks. S&P futures are down 6 points this morning. Dow futures down 66. NASDAQ futures little changed. 10-year Treasury up 3/30 seconds. The yield 0.66%. And Bloomberg Daybreak continues. This is Bloomberg.
Influential country.
My name is Danya. I moved to Manchester in 2010. I came from Afghanistan. The first school day was a bit tough. I had no friends, couldn't speak English, and felt a bit left out. My high school teacher was very supportive. She matched me up with friends that spoke the same language as me. Having friends gave me a lot of confidence. I felt like I'm not being left out.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. Get free one-to-one support with our teacher training advisors to get one step closer to the classroom. Subject to eligibility. Search Get Into Teaching.
At Honda, we believe in our ears. Listening can help solve some of life's biggest conundrums. For example, if a car breaks down and there's no one around to hear it, does it make a sound? The answer is yes. The new Jazz Hybrid will pinpoint your location automatically and send for help at the tap of a button. And with its personal assistant, you can find the answers to other conundrums like, where is a good vegan gluten-free pizza place with free parking? The new Honda Jazz. Hybrid and connected. Honda, the power of dreams. Connectivity subscription available in selected grades.
Ready for some straight talk on what's happening in the MLB? On the Barstool Sports Podcast starting 9, Dallas Braden and Jared Carrabis cut through the BS to break down the league the way they really see it.
Yeah, we're continuing our little mini-series of college baseball coaches in addition to bringing you major league players from throughout the league. If you've been listening to Starting 9 for some time now, you know that we've had a big leaguer on every single episode for probably 2 years now.
Search Starting 9 on TuneIn to listen.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Thursday, June 25th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
U.S. futures drop again on coronavirus concerns.
Wall Street awaits the latest reading on jobless claims and economic growth.
And we'll bring you our exclusive interview with LeBron James.
I will continue to point out things that I know is wrong if I see it, and I will also continue to lead by example as a model citizen, as a black man growing up in America.
New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut want visitors from hotspots to quarantine. Parts of upstate New York are ready to move to phase 4 of reopening. I'm Amy Morris. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. 2 pro golfers and 2 caddies have now tested positive for coronavirus, and it's official. The New York City Marathon has been canceled.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak is brought to you by IBKR, the professional's gateway to the world's markets. Their clients enjoy lowest cost access to stocks, options, futures, Forex, and fixed income from a single integrated account. Learn more at IBKR.com.
And futures are lower this morning, 6:01 on Wall Street. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures down 9 points. Dow futures down 89. NASDAQ futures down 8. The DAX in Germany's up 0.5%. 10-year Treasury up 3/30 seconds, yield 0.66%, and the yield on the 2-year 0.18%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.8% or 27 cents at $37.73 a barrel. Nathan.
Karen, let's get more on the stock action overseas. We begin our global team coverage this morning with Bloomberg's Ewan Potts in London. Good morning, Ewan.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. A turnaround for European stocks this morning following that negative session in the US. The Stoxx 600 was earlier down as much as 1.3%, but shares now trading in the